which is hopefully better. Maybe it's not.
Craig, maybe chat after we're done.
Are we waiting?
It's 9:02 now. Actually, I thought it wasn't time yet, but it is.
I don't think the crowd should expect.
So far. Are we unmuted again, Mike, or?
Yep, you're ready to go.
We're past 9. Joe, were you gonna open this? Cause you have to formally call for a interim chair.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was the most senior employee here.
Yeah, that's what I asked. Stewart's in transit. You're it.
So,
That's item 2.
calling the meeting to order at 8:03 a.m. The first order of business is a recommendation that Director Vandenberg be appointed as acting chair of Creston Valley Services Committee for March 7th, 2024. Do I have a mover?
So moved.
Seconder?
Roger.
Thank you. And
Does that mean affirmative?
And is there anyone against? Hearing none, I turn the meeting over to Director Vandenberg.
All right, thanks, Joe. Good morning, everybody. And in front of us today is the opportunity to review and discuss some of the budget items that have been put in front of us for the upcoming 2024 review, and a couple of other items on the agenda. Can I, first of all, I guess we'll acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whom the traditional lands we are meeting today. And the adoption of the agenda, is there anything that we wish to add or remove?
Good.
Seeing none, so can I get a adoption? of
Move
the
adoption
agenda?
as presented.
Okay, and carry forward. Receipt of the minutes. Any errors or omissions from the February 8th Creston Valley Services minutes? As noted.
Good.
Seeing none. Yep, mover, Roger, seconder, Denise.
We don't require a motion on the minutes, Chair, because they were already received by board, unless there's a correction. It's just received as part of the agenda.
Okay. Then we'll move on to item 6. We have no delegates for this agenda. And so item 7.1, staff reports and on the budget review. So I'm looking to staff, are you prepared to review these items in summary? Or is it better that we just take them one at a time, say, starting with S108, and offer up any discussion around that subject? Joe, what do you prefer? Craig?
Yeah, through the chair, I would prefer that we go through them one by one, and then if there's any questions about them, I think Craig and I can probably point out or answer most questions. There may be some like the diking authority and the jaws of life would be Tristan and the fire protection pieces. But the first ones, I think we can answer your questions.
Okay, so I'm looking around at the group, and is everybody okay with that format to proceed forward?
Sounds
Good
good.
nod. So S108, economic development, is Creston and areas B and C. I don't know if I'm gonna get all of these, but S108 is typically the economic development portion with Creston, the Creston Visitor Center, and the Economic Action Partnership.
And physician recruitment.
And physician recruitment. Okay. So with that in mind, the reminder is, so for economic development for Creston, BC, I believe the requisition is 355, almost 356,000. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is there any thoughts around the economic development? How is it different than the EAP contribution? which is the Economic Action Partnership.
Through the chair to Mike.
Sorry,
Mike?
that is the economic action partnership. So that's your economic development. So out of that funding is the money that
Comes
goes
to
towards
us back from
economic,
EAP.
EAP, physician recruitment.
So that's total.
That's the total. That's everything that goes to those. That's all your economic development activities.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
And-
So, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, and then to the EAP, there's an additional contribution from Area A's Economic Development Service, S107. So the EAP total is a little bit more than what shows here. We've funneled the money sometimes through S108. And some, whether or not we funnel it through S108 or directly from S107 to Kootenai Employment Services is something to be nice if that's clarified. Because it's a little easier to keep track of stuff if you're not moving money from A to B to C.
Okay, thank you. In your e-scribe, S108, the Creston Valley Visitor Center, the only thing that I would note is, obviously staff has suggested that this funding is adequate. The actual funding has gone down, since, 2023 for 2024. Just a note on that. And, there's a note in here that says Destination BC grant for VIC. Which is I guess the Valley Information Center is what VIC means,
Visitor.
Visitor Information Center. And so is that what influences the budget from 2024 to 2023? The decrease in 2024?
Through the chair to Director Bamberg, are we talking about the requisition or the budget? There's one thing that was changed, and that is that there was a $5,000 grant allocation in this budget for Canada Day. That's been moved to S224 as per the discussions around Canada Day. So, you know, that's primarily the one change that happened from the first time that we reviewed the budget. Is that what we're looking at? So that's the primary piece of that decrease in requisition at the top.
Well, the amounts that I have on mine showing, and I'm in OPR 497 operations. And I'm seeing the numbers last year 24,006 and this year 23,007. Am I on the right page?
Which line, Chair?
It's account 43025. That's an
35
east
grants, right.
Is there one that shows the requisitions?
So is that the Area A contribution that I just talked about as flow through to the EAP that's not a grant, actually would be a contribution from other service? That's why I say some of this isn't entirely clear where the money's flowing.
It does say Creston areas B and C at the top of the page. So I'm in eScribe, it's on page 3 of eScribe.
14 of the agenda.
Sorry, through the chair, if I understand correctly, we're looking at account 43025 in service S108. And we're wondering what the grant specified in there is.
Right,
That is Destination BC grant for VIC. So for the Visitor Information Center.
right, and so is that why is the amount being asked lower in 2024 than what we paid in?
Oh, what we received in
Yeah,
2023.
2023, yeah.
Through the chair, I actually do not know that answer, but I see what you're referring to. So the actual was 24,625. The budget amount in 2023 was 23,768. And that number is flat through the entire 5-year financial plan. But
Okay.
I can look into that amount. I understand what the question.
Not necessary, Gary?
Well, yeah, years ago, and actually it was when I was Kootenai Lake Chamber president, we'd applied for Destination BC funding because we had a visitor information center. The metric at that time, you had to be open so many months of the year, so many hours per week. You had to sell certain things that promoted BC, like flags or pins or stuff. And if you met that bar, you could get an annual grant to support the visitor information center. We didn't qualify along Kootenai Lake, even when we partnered at the border crossing with another booth down there. So this is probably what that is. They have a program to support visitor info centers if you meet the bar. And the discrepancy in numbers is probably just our lack of being plugged into what their funding lifts are from year to year. So it's entirely possible. We took an old number, I guess I could pull my book out of the briefcase, and we just plugged it in for 2023. And meanwhile, Destination BC might have escalated their amount or increased their amount to 24,000. So you need to go to Emily, Kieran Hayed, or whoever in Destination BC and ask, what is their projected actual granting amount in years going forward, if you wanted accurate numbers. But I would expect if they gave you 24,000 last year, they're gonna give you 24,000 this year, or more. But that's probably what that is then.
Okay, any further on that piece? I'm seeing none. Next item is the economic action plan.
Oh,
Sorry,
if I could though, in
partnership.
in S108 in general, you have retaining $60,000 year over year in an annual operating surplus, which is fine.
Where are you in?
So if we go back to the main sheet for S108, so I'm on page 12 now of the agenda, but it's your 5-year plan, S108. And so you've got in the revenue, the income side, you have line 49,100. So you plan in this, you've taxed more than you've needed for a number of years. You're reducing or leveling out, taking away some of that additional taxation in future years, but you're planning to retain 60,000 a year, which is kind of unusual. So the question I had is, are you planning to retain that for a type of use, in which case there should be a line item stating that this is for, emerging opportunities or other grants or for something, like just to have the plan to keep $60,000 every year seems unusual to me. It should be being retained for a specific purpose. And it's to me maybe not the best way to do business. I don't know what Yev feels about that. I was curious to know.
Through the chair, I do see that as well. Is Yev on? Yev is on the line. Yep.
He is. So in expenses, it comes down as 59,100 accumulated operating surplus. Wouldn't it better to say that you're keeping that money for what? Or you put it into reserve and build a reserve account if you're gonna have some amount of money somewhere that you can pull out at any time to finance the unexpected, some emerging opportunity. But just to say you're gonna carry it forward as a surplus every year is maybe more confusing to the public. If you got a reserve of 60,000, instead of showing it on the book says, well, we just got some extra money, put it in the reserve, and then 5 years from now, if you need that, you specifically go to that reserve, pull the money and say, here's what we're gonna do with it. It'd be cleaner on the budget sheets instead of just rolling ahead money that it says you don't know what you're gonna use it for.
That's a good point. Yeah, are you able to comment on that?
Yeah, good morning. Yes, I will look into that. There might be some history there that I'm not aware of. My general preference, I agree with Director Jackman, is to set up reserves if you're rolling things forward, but I'll look into it and see what the history is, and see if we should make a change there.
So then my question to that is, when will we hear back response? It does not affect our budget for 2024 per se. It's a conversation that will come back to us later. Is there a specific direction, Director Jackman, that you would like to put forward on that?
Well, I guess direction to staff would be to establish a reserve. We know that we have some services where there's unpredictability, So we set a policy, a little policy, like for building inspection, we say, well, if we have an operating surplus, we'll roll half of it forward to the next year and we'll take half of it, put it into a stabilization reserve. We've done this for a number of different services, saying, yeah, we gotta level stuff out over the years. We've, building inspection, nobody gets the permit, builds and finishes in 1 year, except perhaps Director Vandenberg, remains to be seen. So we have multi-year obligations where it's nice to have some of the money in reserve, some of it on hand. So if you happen to have money that there's volatility in economic opportunity, create a reserve. And when you need it, you draw it. So you don't need a policy necessarily around that, but maybe just a direction to staff. But if you find there's a service where there's a lot of volatility, then you may actually also want to have a policy so that your neighbors, the other members in the service say, yeah, that makes sense and we agree. That we need to have, say it was physician recruitment and something horrific happens with the level of physicians in the area and you say, we need a really big push on this. So it's nice to either have it as an informal discussion, direction to staff, or if you think you need a policy, do a little tiny policy about how you use those surpluses.
So then is it fair that you have come back in our next meeting with a little bit more wholesome view on this? This specific reserve conversation could come up again here with others. And but just to have it tabled for further discussion, because it does not affect our 2024 budget per se, but it's worthwhile to have a conversation. Yab, are you good with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm good with that.
All right.
Through the chair, to Director Vandenberg's question just about the grants, the specified grants, I just don't want to leave the meeting with any confusion about what's in there, so they know so everybody knows. So just so everyone's aware, the base grant funding to the visitor center is actually $18,750 of that 23. And then there's a number of other grants that make up that amount. So it would seem very prudent that the grant amount doesn't change, because some of those would be variable and they're not always guaranteed. Because one of the grants that makes up some of that is Canada Summer Jobs Grant. And that can be definitely a variable grant. Some years you may get it, some years you may not.
So as it stands now, there is no requisition for taxpayers for this, for the tourism center, visitor center.
There is.
Okay, so then the difference is $5,000 is what the requisition is. It doesn't say in here, so it's really hard to figure how this thing works.
No, if I could, Chair, there's the sheet I referred to with a total requisition amount and then lots going on down below in terms of expenditures. These other sheets are just breakouts of that first sheet, that first page. So yeah, there is a requisition, so when it says income and is only 23,000 on this one sheet, OPR 497 you're referred to. And then at the bottom, you'll see you're short 152,000 or 159,556. That amount that you're short, 159,556, comes from the requisition from the S108 service. So this is just little snippets, cutouts of that larger service, and that difference at the bottom is made up through the requisition, part of that requisition for S108.
Thank you for that. Trying to figure this out is fun.
Always.
But to ask all these questions helps with the gray areas.
So similarly, economic action partnership, it's $105,000 contracted service. It doesn't show on this worksheet, OPR 585, where that comes from. It just says you need $105,000 for it. Go up to the top sheet, that's where it came from, part of the requisition for service S108.
Right. Thank you, Director Jackman. We can move along to the economic action plan or partnership. And so the requisition, or I don't know what the proper terminology is, but I'm gonna call it requisition amount is for $105,000 this year versus the $94,400 last year. And the note is KES contract will end in 2025. Any comments or questions on that?
Well, in general, if we look at the history of who has supported us and how, Kootenai Employment Services has been a great, we call it community player, where they have supported all kinds of initiatives across the valley. Of course, KES requires that their board authorize that they do certain things or not do certain things, because this EAP is not really their core thing. Their core thing is training, employment opportunity, lots of programs that they're contracted and funded through provincial and federal programs to do. So there needs to be a heads up and some kind of conversation with KES. How is it going? Are they being adequately funded to do the work they do on behalf of the Economic Action Partnership? And when I say adequately funded, if we rolled back many years ago, it's pretty clear that you'd almost say they would have to be subsidizing some of the functions that we're looking for in terms of economic development through their global funding. And I'm pretty sure the board direction for KES some years ago is don't do that. Make sure that everything that you're doing for local government and community writ large that's outside of your core mandate is fully funded. So we need a conversation that they're still comfortable, that their senior management is comfortable, the services they're providing are adequately funded with this amount. And then do they need to reset or adjust that if they're gonna enter into another contract, future contract? And if not, who else could possibly perform this function for the partners, which is actually all of ABC and Creston? So 2025 would be here pretty quick, so we'd better have that conversation. Somebody has to initiate that conversation. Ideally, it would be CAO Moore and CAO Horn that would say, it's time to make sure that our service delivery partner is in a good spot, and are they looking to continue on? Do you want to change the terms of reference? Do we want to change the focus? Now, KES, and you'll hear this afternoon, they have already kind of they focused more deliberately on fewer things each year than what we tried to do 5 or whatever years ago. It's just like everything under the sun was coming at us. Let's do this, let's do this. So that's part of the conversation too, I think. What can any organization manage on our behalf? And are they comfortable with managing that scope of work from year to year? It'll change from year to year, but are they comfortable doing what they're doing? Always say you can do 10 things well or 20 things badly. I think KES is in a position they're doing a certain number of things very well. But before the contract expires, I'd like that conversation, and maybe through the chair to CEO. Or Mike, does that sound reasonable that you'd be part of that conversation?
Well, the contracts with the regional district, certainly with
Yes.
CAO Horn. I think the only comment I would have from staff, which is a conversation we've had with I would like to see a little bit of a review at this level about, expectations and what we're getting, what we're doing with economic development. I think it's taken even a step further back in determining, for the amount of money that what is our goals? We're talking about your elected officials are here talking about, requisition amount, what's going into it. It'd probably be a good time, we haven't done it for a really long time, step back and said, okay, well, really, what is our goals? Prior to renewing the contract, because I think that forms that conversation, but it might even be a step back and just sort of at this level, have a little bit of a strategic conversation of, what is it that we want? Are we getting what we expect? I know our council has, over the last year, different members of our council has brought up comments about what they would like to see or change, and I'm not suggesting that's right or wrong, it's just, but the town as a partner would like to probably have a conversation about economic development at a higher level, and then certainly that will help inform moving forward, say with KES and what that contract would look like and the value of it. If there's a change of expectations for the town.
Go ahead, Gary.
Well, would a reasonable direction to staff be that CEO Horn, that Stewart arrange a meeting including CEO Moore with KES to have that initial conversation around future contract renewal, to them to have that first discussion, then we would come into it later. But just direction to staff to engage with KES on that topic of future contracts.
Any further comments on that? I'm in favor of that direction.
So am I, so do we have to make a motion?
Not really, it's direction to staff. The board doesn't have to tell us we can or can't do this, is what it comes down to. We're gonna do it anyway.
So just further to highlight, we are meeting with the Economic Action Partnership this afternoon and reviewing the information package they have put forward where they're at with their strategic plan.
Mhm.
And have also demonstrated or illustrated for the money that we've invested in them over the past couple of years, they have leveraged probably 5 times return.
Several months.
In terms of grant towards the projects that they're trying to complete on that strategic plan, which their strategic plan is, there's not much left in it. So having this conversation with them, where are we at, where do we need to go next?
Yeah, so if I could clarify, I think that conversation starts at this level here, absent of KS. I mean, this is the funders. You know, what is the expectation, the town of Creston, which I haven't had the fuller conversation with our council. I just know some of the comments. And so I'd like to be able to explore that with our council, to be able to have our representative come back and say, this is what we as the town like about what we're doing with economic development, this is what we'd like to see it go. If there's any changes to that, I'm just, you know, and it could be just stay the same, but I would like to have that clarity at a higher governance level. Is this the model that we are moving forward with? And then, of course, that informs that contract discussion. So,
Yeah, couple that with Gary's comment about, are they interested?
well, and there's that, because their contracts change too, like, and I don't understand all the complications of their government contracts, but right now, you know, as far as the employment side, which is their core business, I don't even think they hold a contract. I think they, you know, the one contract is held by Nelson, and they, you know, the employment side.
Partnered.
Yeah, so it's kind of, you know, so I don't know what their future in that is, but again, I'd just like to suggest that we talk at a governance level. Is this where we want it to be? Is there something we're missing or something we'd like to do? I'm not suggesting that, I'm just saying that, you know, I think it's time to take a look at it at 5 years later, and then that informs that contract.
Director Jackman?
Yeah, I was thinking kind of a parallel process is to find out, test the waters if KS is in good position to continue as a service provider. But
Yeah.
listening to Mike's comments, maybe direction to staff should be, one, that we arrange for our internal governance conversation about expectations. And following that, then they approach KS. So that makes complete sense that we sharpen our pencil first and talk about.
Yeah, just, and like I say, just from my perspective, it would be just to clarify expectations for what we're doing. You know, and it's even like the position recruitment, you know, there's that budgeted internal to this has gone up a little bit this year, you know. Are we meeting the expectations? Is this the right, and I'm sure it is, but I think it's, you know, we have new people at the table. We've got certainly a whole group of new counselors, about 2 more, you know,
Soon. 2
2 weekends, you know, so it's a great time to have a conversation before you commit to another, you know, long-term contract. And that's,
So then following this through, is it advantageous to table this for the April meeting to have this level of discussion? Or is that premature to your situation with?
well, I would say, well, again, I can't speak for Stuart and, you know, but, you know, I would say that's probably, this is something that we could probably have throughout 2024. You know, so we shouldn't be part of holding up the budget process.
Yeah.
At this time, I would.
Right, but this discussion won't hold up the 2024 budget, but it's in preparation to what are we gonna do past 2025?
Yeah.
And it's
but-
that higher level conversation on, reflecting back on how the services were delivered and what, maybe there's another strategic plan that needs to happen.
Yeah, so I think perhaps I should have a conversation with Stuart about how we could coordinate that. Again, I would have to sit and talk to my council. I have 2 new councilors. They're certainly not gonna be swept up on economic development. First meeting in April, not even, be lucky if we're having this conversation in June.
So we'll hit our action list.
Yeah, so it's really just, we need to sort of, and whether, you know, we do it internally or we bring in a consultant for a day, you know, to help guide us through the conversation, whatever we wanna do that, you know, but I think it's just an opportunity. And perhaps we do it jointly with our council as well.
Yeah.
So that we.
Anything further with Economic Action Partnership? Seeing none. And next on S108, which is Creston, BC. Thanks, Gary, for input. Physician recruitment. I don't have the data with me on physician recruitment. Being a part of the committee that talks in this committee, I'm comfortable and confident work that's being done. And the members around the board, which represent medical practitioners, say impressed with small town Creston being able to reach out and place in front of potential physicians and the like, that Creston is a good place to come and work. So I think the work being done by the physician recruitment has been rewarding. Yes, there was an extra ask last year, but I think the deliverable was met. And we'll find out how well it was met in the next meeting that we have. So those are my comments around the physician recruitment investment. Nothing further?
No, I think you well stated it well. I feel the same way. The presentation they gave us was very thorough and gave me a lot of confidence in what they're doing, and that was why we funded them further to attend that other event in Ireland. And yeah, very happy with what they're doing, so carry on.
Seeing nothing further, so is there anything further in S108? So far S108, seeing no changes. Other than some stuff we'll work forward in the future. Seeing none, can we move on to S191? S191 is our museum requisition. And so I'm looking at the budget that was presented by Tammy, and the ask, make sure it's quite colorful. I gotta make sure I get the right numbers here. I'm gonna go back to our requisition, and 2024 is 126,930. It is, if I'm in the right spot, it is down from, no, yes it is, it's down from the 2023 draft ask.
Through the chair. The actual grant amount, I did confirm with Tammy in January. So the thing to look at in these budgets in particular is that grant line. The
57010.
The 57010, correct. So that's the money that actually the museum would receive. And so I checked because as I think you heard, like there was this conversation about which year is their operating year. So it was confirmed to me that the grant amount for 2024 would be 125,619, which is the same as 2023. I found that a little bit odd, but that is what was confirmed at the end of January to me by the museum. So the 126, the reason it went down just a tiny bit is grants in lieu in this service. I tend to try not to budget for because it just bounces all over the place. So the piece that's actually made that amount go down just a little bit is that $519 prior year surplus in 49100. But this service is fairly stable. So when it goes to 2025, the primary increase from 126, well, almost 127 to 131 is their grant. So that's the primary area that drives what that requisition is.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. The other note that I can see according to the budget that Tammy presented is we would fund 125,000 of the 184 that they budget to operate on for the year.
That's correct. We are the primary funder.
Any comments?
No, I think we leave it. Joe has confirmation. They're in a bit of a reset. Part of their money is students. It's a big part of their, Canada student grants and stuff. And until their new board decides what they want to do in terms of projects or any upgrades of facilities, it just makes sense to leave it what they asked for and see what happens in the next year.
Good. Moving then along to S-193, the library. It would appear the requisition amount is 500, just shy of 600,000, 2024. Up about 40,000 from 2023. Open up for comments.
There's sort of three sources, you know, we've so far have agreed to the lift requested from the Library Society, a little more contribution to reserve, which I think is prudent, given the size of the building, and we've seen a little bigger hit in the community services fee, not a lot, $5,000, and maybe just to confirm, Joe, that's based on level of activity around that facility, you know, amount of time that AJ and others would have spent, or just also, and you and your staff?
No, through the chair, so that wouldn't include anything that AJ would be doing. That would always just turn up as a transfer to other service.
Okay.
So there's primarily there were a few things that changed in that calculation of the community services fee this year. One is just, of course, the salary increases, so that is calculated in. But the other piece is that we had less services to spread the costs around. So some of that has very negligible, but it does impact that piece. So, but that's primarily the two pieces that impacted the community services fee.
We also, Joe, do we manage Nelson and Castlegar libraries?
Through the chair, no. So Castlegar, most of the other library services, what makes this service particularly unique, and I think it's a good function of it. Number one is it does provide some grants to some reading centers. So I think that's a good strategy. That's one thing that's different. But the major thing that's different is that we're the owner of the building. So that is a significant difference from the other services. In the other services, the buildings are either owned outright by the library societies, or they're owned by a municipality. So those other services are strictly contribution services from the regional district. And so if you're also looking at those other services and those amounts, it's always like, if you were to look at Castlegar or Nelson, for example, there are actual multiple services in each case that are contributing to either the Castlegar or the Nelson library. And then what you don't see in the regional district budgets in those cases are the municipal contributions to those libraries, because those are contained in the municipal budgets. So in terms of a regional district library service, this service is most set up like an actual regional library service. The other ones are contribution services. So you would actually have to gather information from multiple sources to compare. So just to be careful that inside the RDCK budget, all of the other library services that are listed there do not contain the full grant amounts to those, what's actually funding, in particular, Nelson and Castlegar library services. If that makes sense.
No, that's it's good to point out. Looking around, any more questions? So I can't let this go, but on the budget, in terms of the presentation that was given to us, we have a capital improvement of 80,000 that's wishing to take place this year. We have capital reserve of 188,000. We have investments of 200,000, both of which don't have policy. And and without knowing how that money is to be earmarked, I'm not comfortable, excuse me, supporting a capital improvements project when there's lots of money sitting in a reserve. And this is the year where I feel as though I need to be very careful about how taxpayer money is being allocated. So I'm gonna put that out and, right now, it's a big ask, it's 600,000. And thank you, Joe, for pointing out the other ones in comparison. But as I look at the budget with the capital reserve amount and the investments amount, there's lots of money there. There's an opportunity to reduce some of this tax burden, I feel. Director Jackman.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess it's not a simple, small process. It's well underway. Craig's involved in it heavily. The capital asset management plan for all of these buildings is what I'd really like to see. I mean, when we saw the water system once, some years ago, because we did them. You think about pipe in the ground, it's good for 60 to 80 years in Riendell, and it's good for nothing in Erickson in terms of lifespan. It's at its lifespan, old asbestos cement, and it's $10 million liability, something in that order. We really need those harder numbers before I would want to start juggling any of these budget figures up and down. And so through the chair, we've seen all kinds of documents coming out. I've seen one for Riendell Rec Center recently. We've seen some stuff in this building. That building where the library and some of our staff are housed, do we have almost have a long-term capital asset management plan for that building through the chair?
Through the chair, so the asset management plan project that started in 2023, the last I was told is that we will have meetings with the consultant and a report for the board in the second quarter. So April, we believe, haven't had those meetings to date, but with regards to the library and to the chair's question, I believe you're referring to the library's capital plan for what they're doing, because we don't have a concise capital plan for the library as the owners of the building just yet. But what they're doing with their money on the internal pieces, according to their contract that they have to deliver library services inside the facility. So we work with the manager of the library to ensure that what they're doing to our building is appropriate for their use and for the investment in our property. But that we're also having conversations about the offices side yesterday, even with corporate services, about what our long-term plan is there and how that fits with the Creston Education Center investment and our annual payment there. So there is a lot of moving pieces here. And I hope that fills in the blanks, but we do intend to have for the library facility a long-term plan definitely before the next budget cycle, which is for 2025 and so forth. And we also intend to have that for all of our facilities.
So if I could, Chair?
Yes.
So we need to mesh those and we need to be clear. So in a building where kids roll around on the carpet and play on the floor because it's a good thing and we want it, and we want those group circles where they can sit. Who's looking after the carpet, or who's putting a special floor, or who's this or who's that? We need to have those clearly identified in the two plans, because it's one thing to say this building per square foot takes this, but that building's unique because there's a plan to do some things that critically impact the service delivery, their service delivery. And there's a plan for the building envelope and things we have to look after, which also pretty critically affect service delivery, like is it too hot or too cold in the building? So until we mesh them, I didn't want to muck around with it. Muck around's not the right word. I didn't want to scrutinize it too closely until we see two plans meshed. And it's pretty clear it's different from this building. We have two sources of funding to make sure that place delivers this service in a really at a high standard of high level of service delivery, clean, attractive, and meeting public needs. So are we a year away? Maybe. I sure hope so. We keep kicking this down the road a little bit, but hope we're getting close.
So if
Through the chair, I think Craig, go ahead, Craig.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna say, I think we're very hopeful that by sometime, we're hoping, I think for sure, that by all rec in September that I shouldn't really say all rec, because this is really gonna be a broad regional district discussion across multiple services and multiple service type areas. But we're really hoping that that's gonna be taking place sometime at the latest mid-year. Craig, that would be correct based upon the timelines we've gotten so far, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
anything further. So, my direction would be, or suggested to be to the staff is, to work with the library to develop a policy around those amounts, the capital reserve and the investment amount. There's gotta be a policy that says, this is what this money is earmarked for, this is how it's going to be held in reserve, and this is why it's gonna be, because we just have amounts that are sitting in a couple of accounts presumably, with no understanding of what the amounts are.
Joe, do you wanna take that one?
Well, through the chair, so what we can do is that for the next meeting, we can bring back the agreement with the library. So to Director Jackman's points, the agreement with the library defines what parts we're responsible for and what parts they are responsible for. To Director Vandenberg's point, we don't necessarily know how they are planning out their capital whether you call it capital improvements or just improvements to the inside of their building. I don't know that other than what I actually think that Sarah does a good job of trying to give you that glimpse. But we could definitely get Sarah to try and give us a little bit more of a glimpse of their long-term plans for the improvements that they're responsible for. So we can definitely talk to her about that. So there's two pieces here. So the asset management work that we're doing, that we're talking about, hopefully we have that together by mid-year. That will talk about that building envelope, electrical, air handling, so mechanical, the pavement around the building, which we actually just did a number of years ago, things like the roof, which we just did a number of years ago. So then we can definitely tie in what we have in reserves for those physical building components and try and give you a glimpse of what those pieces and how the library society itself is planning on budgeting for its long-term improvements that it needs to do inside of its space.
And Joe, I'm out of order here, but you did just talk to Sarah. She's sitting in the room.
Oh, great.
Hey, Joe.
It's Sarah.
Thank you for that, and the reason that I'm putting this on the table, and this is good for us to be aware of, is that when the public sees this document, this budget document, and they draw themselves down to, they see the list of what the expenses are, and what the ask is, and then they see at the bottom, money sitting in reserve and investments. As a public person, I would be saying, you've got $388,000 sitting off to the side. Why are you asking for $600,000? Okay, it's a logical question from our taxpayers, and how to be able to illustrate why those monies are sitting there and for what for over a time frame is a necessary part of this conversation.
No, and through the chair, we agree. I think for Craig and myself, I would say that we have some services where we have a very clear plan on how we're going to fund capital moving forward. And we have some services that are very much underfunded. That's kind of the way of the regional district in some ways. So we do need, the intent is hopefully the intent around the asset management work that will be coming forward through the work that AJ and Craig, he was very, very much involved in that piece, is that there will be this discussion around the board table about how we plan for capital long term. I would say that right now there's probably, I would say, Craig, only one service that I think we've got a fairly stable grip on it. Most of the other services we haven't tied tied that piece quite together yet, which will be that work throughout this year.
All right, anything further, any further comments? No? Sorry, public time's coming up. So the next item that I have is S-240, the airport. That's, go ahead, Gary, did I skip over one?
No, on airport. I'd really rather not show on the budget on the budget sheet. So again, on the agenda package, page 18 and 24, we show two negative numbers in income, when in fact, don't do that, just show the requisition and then $91 prior year service, and show those $30,000 and $15,000, which is our commitment to support the airport master plan, as expenditures in 2024 and 2025, labeled as exactly that. So when somebody looks at this in this big book, once this big book gets published again, it's really clear to them where that money's going. So I'd just rather it not be formatted the way I see it on page 18 and 24.
Okay,
Don't put red in the book, please. Just show it in the expense line and say it's going to town of Creston for the master plan.
I guess from my point of view, when it comes to the airport, we've got the current airport master plan. But there's an opportunity to see where we're at with the airport and what can the airport do in the future? What is what is the possibilities? And to me, that's the bigger question. It's fairly consistent from year to year as I look at their budget. The ask is the same, but I don't see the return on that investment. I don't see where we're going with it. It's just this, we're gonna continue for the next 10, 15 years, and we're gonna contribute, I don't even know what our requisition amount is. It doesn't say on there. Requisition is 200,000, 240,000. But there's no, I don't see where we have an opportunity to really leverage the airport, because it is a very interesting asset, and it could be very helpful to our economic development. And I also understand too that we have a change in the board, so we'll have another direction. And I know that the town of Creston has interest in the future of the airport, current and future. So from my perspective, sitting at this table, I'm gonna be focused on where are we going? What is the opportunity with that airport? Where are we going? What is the return on our investment going to be? I think that has to happen. That's my point of view to the airport.
Through the chair that was me making a mistake on which line I put that grant in, and I apologize. Yes, that should have been in 57010. And you are correct about what the amount is for. And I would just say this, having gone through the I think for Mike was in a little bit of a different capacity when we did with the town at the time that we went through the cemetery master plan process. But if that project is done well, like I would think it was done very well on the cemetery piece, I think you will get that plan that will help provide that guidance. Because I know that things were, Gary would have been around the table at the time of cemetery. It was very crunchy for a while. And that cemetery plan really helped set the path forward and create a common understanding of how that would work. And I really see the master plan piece that you've started here as being very critical to that as well.
We need it.
All right. Next item, I believe, is the opportunity, to talk about S-164, the diking district areas B and C. And I guess, Gary, did you wanna?
Well, yeah, my scribble notes might as well. That's why they're on the page. So, 26,900, again, operating reserve or accumulated operating surplus. So this is an odd one where, not being a direct participant, why would you accumulate a surplus in a service like this if you have no responsibility for the asset? And you're not gonna take up and be part of any innovative, emerging, or new urgent issues that come up, that it's pretty much arm's length. And so given that, either you give this money to this, to the people who do have to be responsible as a grant and say, we got no other money, here it is. Or you don't tax or something, but it just makes no sense to be holding money, or how we even got there. We've had so few conversations about this, so I commend our acting chair for bringing this up. But we shouldn't be holding money like this, in my view, unless we had a reason to hold money like this, and there's no reason, no rhyme, no reason. So I guess if I was participant in the service, I'd really want to know what are their total sources of revenue? What are they doing with the money? How is their annual inspection look? There's requirement pre and post freshet, stuff I've looked at under Dike Maintenance Act. Are they keeping up with vegetation control? Do they have any repair issues to take care of? And if they have, then we can say why we're doing it, give them the balance of the money so we're not holding any kind of surplus. But I wouldn't give money to a group unless I knew that they had a responsible plan for using it, because after all, it is taxpayer money. So just kind of general questions in my mind floating around on that one. I don't know if anybody on staff here could answer or speak to it, because I think we're so arm's length to this that nobody quite knows.
Through the chair, and I, just told me to shut up, but like when I'm just going through actuals for this service, so I'm not involved. I used to do this budget, I'm not involved anymore. But 2022, the grant was not applied for and received, so that would be $7,500 of accumulated
Surplus.
of where that surplus amount would come from. 2021, it was applied for and received. And my expectation is that if I was to keep going back, I would find that every once in a while. Because it looks like maybe it's 2019. It looks like it's coming from just a couple of years of where the grant may not have been applied for.
So
Director Jackman?
So if I might, either not applied for or a failure to report, so we didn't release the funding, shades of
Sorry, correct.
Crawford Bay Cemetery. They may have said we want money, not reported out fully, and we hold the money. So again, we need to resolve that. If they can if they can account for with appropriate paperwork past year's activities, and they therefore would be entitled to that money, then they should have that money. We shouldn't be holding on to it. The same as, like I say, Crawford Bay Cemetery, you've heard some of the history of that. If they don't meet the minimum reporting requirements, they don't get the money. So we gotta get caught up on that.
So, Director Terry and I have sat down with the group on a few occasions, and the purpose of meeting with them was to figure out what it is that they do. Their understanding is that they are responsible for the Lower Goat diking and have the authority to manage the maintenance of it. As a director, it took me a long time to verify that, and I just got it verified from the province. I don't know why it took so long, but in fact, they do collect. Now, the monies that they collect, the 7,500 that we're talking about, that is from that area that benefits only, correct? So it's a limited number of houses that are taxed for that. And but the other thing that we kind of discovered is that they also have an understanding that they provide community services beyond that of the diking district. And so there's a couple of things here. There's a taxation for 7,500, and then there's an RDCK grant for 3,000. But it's not clear as to how the community is benefiting from the 3,000 or the 7,500. And that's the part that Director Tierney and I are trying to work with the group to have first open meetings to the public, which they don't, only their AGM. And secondly, I can see their their plan, but it doesn't say what they're gonna do with the money. Or what the intended, the intention is. So, Roger, do you have anything to add?
Just I'd like clarification on that $3,000 grant. Joe, is that, something that is happening annually? And
Yeah, through the
for how long?
Through the chair, the grant amount is 7,500. It's very that's very consistent going all the way, I'm back to 2016, I believe. I don't want to get the dates wrong for you. Just gonna. Wait, what's that? 2000, oh, sorry, yeah, so 2017 is when there seems to have been a change in the requisition for this service. So the grant amount stayed flat at 7,500 in the budget. Or sorry, I can't say because I'm looking at actuals here, at the amount received, except for that 1 year. I only found 1 year where it wasn't, but essentially each year from about that year on, we were seems that we started doing an accumulated surplus. I'm just trying to go back to see if there was any budget notes around that time. It could be, like, I'm sorry, like really dragging my memory out here. It could be that there was concern at some point in time in that service about needing to do work on that dike. And it could be that there may have been a discussion around starting to put some money away for leveraging different types of other grants for that diking authority. I'm not sure, but it just looks like there was something that must have changed in that service around 2017 budget year.
Gary made the point that part of that money, and them being the authority, would have the responsibility to do pre-freshet inspection and post-freshet inspection. Do they have any responsibility of passing that on to the province, or where would those records be submitted to?
They qualified to do this.
And how are they qualified? Yeah, to do that. I know that there are a number of people on their board that are longtime residents. And perhaps have a history of repairs.
So perhaps, Joel, while you're looking into looking at their financial plan, the $7,500 that they taxes in terms of grants, and then there's an RDCK grant of $3,000, that equals to 10,500. And in the requisition of S-164, it's 10,860. So is that full amount the requisition for those residents in that area in terms of taxation, the 10,600? They see it as getting a grant of 3,000 and then getting grants from taxation of 7,500 on their spreadsheets.
Sorry, through the chart, I didn't quite understand.
Is the full
Sorry.
amount of 10,860 requisition from taxes for that particular area?
Yeah, yes.
So that $3,000 grant has been,
7,500.
okay, we're talking there's,
Yeah, if
yes,
Sorry,
sorry.
Gary.
I can only try and read between the lines. Now, I wasn't invited to these meetings, even though I was around the table. Maybe when the roughly $3,000 hike was made, somebody thought they're gonna get that money over and above the 7,500. To me, if that was the case, if there's an expectation, that would, in my mind, amount to a slush fund. We only should be giving them money for dike maintenance, and it should follow the Dike Maintenance Act. I just pulled it up. It looks like another piece has been repealed, so I may not find what I want to find in there. We should only give them one grant. It shouldn't be any other grant, and it doesn't appear as though we've given them any other grant.
Prior
So
to,
maybe they have something in their mind that there's another source of money. There should not. There should be a bylaw that's followed religiously. If it is money to maintain a dike, it should be one allocation, it should be one amount, it should be what they ask for, and they should back it up with their financial statements, what they've done previously, what they spent it on, what their future needs are, who their board of directors are, who they're accountable to. If it's not, we withhold money, as apparently happened for 1 year. There's no two grants here. And if somebody left that impression in somebody's mind, you should take it out of your mind. There's no extra $3,000 to do something. We tax people for a specific purpose, not for, oh, here's some more money. So I would stop talking about anything but a single grant that would follow the terms of the bylaw, and that's it.
So through the chair, so as I said, the year that this seemed to change was 2017. So in 2017, the budgeted grant was increased. So that line, 57010, that line was budgeted to increase $2,500 to 10,000. In 2017, the actual amount, just gotta make sure I'm looking at so I'm just have to flip between a number of different screens. Yeah, the actual amount given was $7,500. So something happened in that year where there was an increase to the budgeted grant. That year, the actuals still only drew the 7,500. So that was the first year that there was a surplus. So what it looks like to me, I think there is a conversation that needs to take place with the diking authority. I think that's absolutely correct. Is that the grant amount always stayed the same. The budget, I'd have to go and look but I mean, like according to this year's budget, we're only budgeting that $7,500. But we didn't change the taxation requisition. So does that, I don't know if I'm explaining that clearly enough.
No, you.
But 2017, there was a change. So when you're looking at that accumulated surplus line, that's not a grant. That is actually part of the plan. That's all I can really say to that.
Okay, no, the information you're providing, conversation with Director Jackman is making it a little bit clearer. Speaking from my point of view, this has been really difficult to figure out what is going on here. And the direction of staff would be, Joe, thank you for that, is to reach out to the Goat River Association and have those conversations. We need to understand it better. And certainly knowing that some of the residents have reached out to me and they don't know what's going on. And I can't explain it, because it's a difficult one. We need to understand more. And to Gary's point about the bylaw, I would love to see that bylaw so I can read it and understand it. That would be very helpful. So I would suggest, I wish to shift this over to your side and have some conversations, and I'll wait to discuss this again Roger, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I think just the $3,000 seems a bit of a question mark and
No,
And,
Joe, just to be
particularly
clear,
look into that.
where we're getting the 3,000, and I don't mean to confuse you, is their 5-year financial plan on their spreadsheet says RDCK grants 3,000 straight across the board for the next 5 years, and then regional district taxes 7,500. And that is their spreadsheet. That's where we're getting those numbers from.
Okay, sorry, thank you for, yeah, sorry, I wasn't looking at their sheet. It's really just, like, as I said, very interesting, like that amount doesn't seem to have changed. So I don't even know why they're showing that 3,000, but there's something in 2017 is what has changed this financial plan for sure.
Anything further? Okay, can we move to S-152 Jaws of Life, Creston areas A, B, and C?
Sure.
Now, I know, talking with Director Jackman, that, there's been a desire to I don't know,
Yes, sir.
Sorry, just quickly, through that, for the towns. Portions, so we had that.
okay, Gary, I'm gonna leave this in your report.
Sure. So-
History here.
First off, where's my scribble notes? Thank you very much, Mike. It's exactly what I wanted to see, is the first part, because I realize the bylaws under review, just looking on who's in the meeting and who's not, I don't see Nora, I guess I do see Tristan, of course, could hopefully speak to some of this. Looking through numbers, we have a $29,500 accumulated surplus. Whereas we have 3, I guess, service delivery entities that I've heard from one of them, and I suspect from Yak as well, that maybe they could certainly use a little more money. And then the biggest question was in the question of the town, because I think town has the best records from what I've understood from when CEO Moore used to be the chief, from the prior chief, and from the current chief, Jared, that they have a better handle on. So revenue, yeah, service bylaw 50,000. Province of BC will pay money when you're outside your service area and outside of a bylaw responsibility. So about 70,000 revenue.
If I can, they're starting to deny more of those too. So they do understand our service area is growing by contract, so now there's anything literally outside of our municipal boundaries now, outside of basically outside the municipal boundaries. So we used to be able to get task numbers going even up to like in the Wendell protection area, but now they know that we actually have that
As
contract.
far as Masco.
And so now as far as the mask goes, so there's, where we're able to collect on those calls, even like, from basically Erickson to Kitchener. We haven't had task numbers in Erickson for a long time. So now it's basically almost Kitchener before you start getting approval for those task numbers. So the revenue's getting less. Well,
So,
because depending where the accident's at, so we actually provide fire protection to just past the Yellow Bridge, so maybe about halfway to Kitchener. So,
and to a and then road rescue to a Coakley.
yeah, and nothing in West Creston,
Substantial.
nothing over Lakeview or Oak Creek, these are all getting denied now, so.
So if I can share, what I appreciate, this is a great snapshot, because as I say, town has been trying to track something that's fairly complicated that will help us formulate, I think, how we need to rewrite this bylaw. If we get this bylaw done this year, and let's get it done this year, because we need to be careful that we don't create a replacement bylaw that makes more sense. Right now, we're having people receiving a relatively expensive service, say in Boswell where I live, and paying very, very little for it. And it's creating a fairly heavy burden on, say, Riendell Fire Service and or Creston coming all the way up to Coakley Bridge, a lot of time, a lot of complicated accidents with vehicles over the bank and many, many hours, sometimes overnight and sometimes a couple of days, like the fire at Sirdar, the diesel tanker truck. So what we have to be sensitive to, and Mike's framed here really well, that there's a couple sources of money and we want to maximize our eligibility with the province of BC. Whatever we do with bylaws and contracts with town, we want to make sure that we maximize the opportunity to charge the province when vehicle extrication tools or whatever is eligible, that they can charge that to the province and be reimbursed for it. I want to see Yak and Riendell Fire Services doing the same, like never missing the opportunity to charge money for what they can charge money. So there's, our service bylaws need to be very careful so we don't automatically exclude that opportunity. And I don't think either of services, and I will be very quiet in a minute and let Tristan maybe provide his understanding of where we're at, that we don't miss out on opportunity to get money. Because this is not a quick and easy service to provide. We are continually out of almost 100 calls, probably 95% plus in the East Shore, out of Riendell, between Riendell Fire and Boswell Emergency Volunteers. They are for first responder, vehicle extrication, lift assist, all of these things that our community members tell me continually they want. They want it to be reliable and they want it to be as fairly funded as possible. So there's not a whole lot we can do this year, but we all just have to have a full sit-down conversation that we maximize provincial revenue. The only thing we could do this year, and out of all my scribble notes under this one, is we're holding an accumulated surplus. Meanwhile, I'm seeing requests for increases in the Riendell Fire Protection by considerable amounts, lifts in the budget year over year. Whereas I know most of the time they spend rolling, other than training and basic stuff, they actually in a vehicle is for this kind of service. And I don't see a lift in the revenue for this. You know, the increase in revenue is practically nothing, 0.3% or something like that. So can we do something with the current accumulated surplus? So I'd like to know what Yak is seeing in terms of pressure for road rescue. And I'd like to know where staff is at for making sense of this service so that we can maximize revenue and account for everybody's true costs and not just kind of put what could be conceived as an arbitrary amount of money to each of the three service providers. So I don't know if through the chair, if Tristan has a handle on this right now, where are we at?
Through the chair, thank you. I'll do my best to answer this. First off, staff is open to review this budget and the financial structure for the upcoming fiscal year and take a look at this. My understanding of the current structure right now is the transfer to other service, 25,000 goes to Yak and then 38,775 to Riendell to compensate for the increased amount of first responder calls that Riendell does outside of their fire protection area. I don't have any data or I'm not aware of numbers for missed opportunities for reclaiming money from the province at this point. But I could do a deeper dive into that and see if there are those missed opportunities.
Go ahead, Mike.
So, for the EMVs, or well, EMCR now, but for their task number, the only tasks that you would get, again, that's what I was just saying, so Yak would not get any unless they're outside of their fire protection boundaries. So there is no task number you can get for road rescue and that's the problem. So we were getting them in Canyon and Windle, for example, up until we signed those fire protection contracts. And now it's your fire protection area, they now look at that, they don't give you a task number for those areas. And so then for Riendell, you'd be able to get it for your auto extrication outside of any fire protection.
Junction South.
Yeah, but you wouldn't get it for first responder, it'd only be for the auto extrication calls.
So if I might share.
Just a question really quickly, how then does any potential modification or bylaw change help with collection of expenses. And that's to you, Director Jackman, and then, perhaps others can jump in.
I should note, Tom Dool, he's still there, I think. I went to participants. I think Tom might be on the meeting. And he will be redoing the bylaw. Maybe he's not. To me, there were two approaches. One, either we have in the past, we increase the amount that ABC in town all pay into this and then make budget-based sensible reallocations of that money to cover the real costs. We haven't done a really close scrutiny of those, like there's a grant line here, 50,000. And CAO Moore has just shown us, it's pretty close. It's unpredictable. So you can't put an exact number there, but it's pretty close to reality. But we haven't been making those judgment calls or adjustments on two sides. One, what's it actually costing our services that are, when they're not doing, fire call, and what other sources of revenue are there? So if we can't all agree that we would have a large pot of money, that we lift everybody's taxes, recognizing that you should see some offset, some reduction in fire response contract amounts, or the town itself should see some other benefit, because there's, we've measured what it costs to do all these services, lift assist and first responder vehicle extrication. We've measured that, we know what it is. And when we put the right amount of money into the pot to do those well, plus or minus so many thousands of dollars, unpredictable, that then all the other costs of the core fire service could potentially be lowered a bit. If we can't come to that agreement, we've only done that by throwing a dart and just adding 10, 20,000 here and there and shuffling the deck. If we can't come to that, then we might have to come down to some kind of more discrete, defined area of service and say, well, this community needs this more than that. CEO Moore has pointed out really well to us, and Jared, it might have been actually Chief Riel pointed out, it'd be embarrassing to send a fire truck and a crew out and the ambulance beats them by 15 minutes and the passenger's already, not 15, but beats them by 5 minutes and they've almost taken the patient and they're almost loaded and ready to leave. So it does make sense. We don't have the same challenges to get to houses, to get up driveways, to help we're not equal across the area. We have different geography. So if we have to cut this into a few defined area bylaws, I'm good with that. If we can come to some agreement that we have accurate measurement of both what it costs, and we always apply for cost recovery everywhere we can, I'm good with that. But we just have to sit down and have a serious conversation about this and rewrite our bylaws, however we rewrite them, so we maximize the amount the province pays. Because everybody's kind of tired of us picking up the extra through downloading. I appreciate the service contracts through the town of Creston, but I sure don't want to let the province off the hook.
So if I can, it's really, the issue isn't rewriting this bylaw. The issue is if you have fire protection, they will not give you a task number. I mean, that's, so no matter how you slice it, is if you have fire protection. So the only way you can get the task number is outside of those defined fire protection areas. And so Riondell would be from, when they leave their, do they provide fire protection on in Crawford Bay?
No, to the junction of Riondell
So
Road.
when they
and
leave the
Free-
junction, any motor vehicle accident they're going to could be a task number down to a Coakley Creek or wherever their arbitrary line in the sand is at. So that's the opportunity with the province. Outside of that, I'm not aware of any other funding opportunity through them for first responder. In fact, they reject that wholeheartedly, as that's a service you choose to provide. Now, and I guess I'm speaking just, as the CAO for the town and my past experience in the fire service is, if there's a desire to increase levels of service in these areas without fire protection, I'm not sure this bylaw needs to be rewritten to make that happen. So the town, so for an example, is if there's out of this requisition amount, if there's an amount of money, for example, that's being given to the Boswell first responders, I think it's, from my perception, I think it's fair that it is across the entire board, because somebody from Creston could be walking down the road and have a heart attack in the Boswell first responder area. So they're receiving the service too, no different than road rescue, you know, residents, wherever they are in this area, you know, are receiving that service. So I don't think it's a matter of tearing it up as much as just acknowledging the levels of service that's desired in each of those areas. And I don't think anybody's looking at. And then your comment about reducing costs for the fire service, perhaps the town of Creston spends about $30,000 a year on first responder medical services now, but that's not providing any services to any of the regional district areas except for Erickson. So if Canyon, Lister, or Windle, or West Creston, if that was a service that we could provide, and it's a volunteer issue, not a money issue. If we got to the point where the volunteers wanted to provide that level of service, and we wanted to fund it out of this bylaw versus increasing the fire protection contract at that time. Sure, I think those are probably areas that could be discussed at that time. You know, I don't know if it makes, but yeah, I'm not, so I'm a little confused, just, you know, of the bylaw, why a bylaw rewrite would be required.
If I might,
Yes.
the only reason I think in the past, when I sat at the table with three other directors,
Yeah.
different people, they didn't want to take this, let's measure it, quantify it, and pay every group that's providing the service that every community or cluster wants. They didn't want to seem to take that approach and recognize that there may be offsets. I just met with resistance, so that's the only reason I started to say, well, maybe we have to tear this bylaw up. Or remaining within it would be great if we first change the title and then we made it more clear what service opportunities there are and how we would agree to provide that, because we get along pretty well as a rule, and who would provide that and how we make sure that they're not subsidizing that level of service to that community. I think town is in a good position. Riendell, to come back to that, when we flip to that one, we have zero revenue for road rescue, again, in 2023, zero. Although I know over and over and over again, they've gone beyond the junction of Riendell Road and 3A to help with vehicles in the ditch or plowed up against the rocks or over the bank, but we have zero revenue. And so I understand the restrictions on fire protection area. I'm just concerned that the lost opportunity is massive. Nobody's done the paperwork except town at their own expense to show that they're helping recover costs that helps all of us in this service.
And that's a point that you perhaps could get those task numbers for when Riondell leaves there. And I don't know how many calls or how much value that would be, but it is, you know, even if it's $5,000, it's $5,000 or 10, you know, it's gonna be something.
Yeah.
I don't know the call volume, but I think that's, you know, that's one of the, I think when you talk about emergency services on the broader scale, and I mean, and this is kind of maybe, could be done in a similar approach, as, you know, we're gonna talk about economic development, about expectations, is that perhaps, you know, this is a conversation that all the stakeholders in this bylaw sit down and say, well, what are the expectations? Because all our areas are so much different. You know, I guess speaking on behalf of the town, I would think it'd be great if you wanted to fund first responder through this bylaw, and then I can give $30,000 back to my taxpayers and then share the bigger cost. You know, that's a win for us. So, but, you know, but I would say when you're looking at this type of service, because people are transient throughout our areas, is that this is a kind of service I think works well taxed on the greater area. And I mean, this bylaw here, I believe in covered Darkwoods. You know, so
Technically,
yeah,
if
so
you gotta-
you know, so you're getting taxation from literally every area, every square inch of this of the service area that you know, first responder in Boswell and Crawford Bay, for example, I think is valuable to residents of Creston who visit that area too. So I wouldn't be saying we shouldn't share in that cost. So I wouldn't look at it as a subsidy. I'm not speaking on the elected officials part, but that's how I would guide our elected officials in the conversation.
Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. And if the only thing staff can take away from my standpoint is we have a surplus that maybe shouldn't be there. And why the heck is there no revenue from junction of Riendell Road and Highway 3A down to the Oakley Bridge? And those maybe go back to Deputy Chief. And if we leave it as is for this year, we continue with stress on the Riendell budget, is all I can say. That more and more money is being asked for paid on call and for staff salaries. more and more money every year, increasing. And I know that the work is not putting out structural fires. The work is what we're talking about here. So how are we gonna compensate for that? I just keep saying, okay, raise the budget again. It's not gonna happen. We need a deeper conversation. I really appreciate CEO Moore's philosophy that yes, if we can hold it as one collective bylaw, I agree. That is the best way.
So there's an opportunity here to have further discussion at this level to understand the bigger opportunity. To define under the umbrella what's working, what's not working. That could be staff direction. Tristan, do you have anything to opt in with based on what you're hearing in this conversation?
Through the chair, nothing further from my perspective at this time. I've heard the direction there, and I'll do a little bit more digging and then consult with our fire chief as well and pass that information on to him.
Okay, I think it is worth a further deep dive discussion around this. Because it sounds like there's opportunities and the opportunity for consolidation to have this discussion. As we talked about with hear anything further? Roger?
No, just there's prior year surplus, and accumulated operating surplus, and they disappear after 2024. They're gone. So that's the biggest concern in my mind, what happened.
The only, before we move away from that, the only comment I have is, and I put it at the bottom, is that if we generate any surplus, it'll be all going to our road rescue reserve. We do have to replace our road rescue apparatus probably in the next few years. And I mean, originally we were looking about 400 to 450,000. That's probably not 657.
And through policy, I would expect the councils consider that. And the ironic thing is in the Reindale service, unlike Castlegar IJ, the fire service holds the entire burden for that vehicle. That it's a F-550 with a lot of expensive add-ons and equipment in it. Instead of being held in this service, the road rescue service, it's held in a fire service. And there's no way to track whether or not that's being properly accounted for the replacement of that equipment. And that's a flaw I pointed out over and over the years, that why are we not operating similar to what I see in I&J in terms of who holds the equipment and is responsible for future replacement?
Yeah, so through the chair, so we have been collecting, as you can see in the budget, we actually intentionally collect for reserves for that service for what we feel would be the RD's portion through that. So the other, because that same apparatus is used in fire protection, for fire protection purposes as well. And so, you know, there's probably in the cost of the apparatus, it'd be kind of a 50-50 split. So the town is putting away money for that apparatus, but you know, because of the cost changes in fire trucks and apparatus in the last 3 years, I guess, since COVID, the start of COVID, you know, all those numbers, even for all our reserves, are now out of whack. You know, what we plan for a fire engine now is closer to $1 million when you're planning for, you know, 700, 800,000. So it's
Roger,
gonna be a job.
want to adopt it?
Yeah, Chief Feast, just wondered if you'd make a comment about, have you had a chance to talk to the Yak Fire Department and understand how road rescue is affecting their operations?
Through the chair, we haven't had direct conversations about how it's affecting their operations. They're not any different, I would say, than Ryandale. With the exception that they do have that coverage up to their fire protection area goes just east of Kitchener there. But yeah, there is obviously costs incurred with the training and equipment and whatnot there. Which is, my understanding is what this whole service pays towards, correct?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're at 10:33 according to my camera. We should take a little bit of a
Stretch.
5 minutes ought to be enough. And so we'll see everybody back in countdown 4 minutes and 50 seconds.
Oh, sure.
Through the chair, I do have
Joe,
some
you
more
can have a break
information
too.
on this. I do have some information on S-164 that may help untangle that mystery. So whenever you want me to give you that, I now can remember what the conversations I've heard in the past are, because just based upon some information I found in our accounts.
Okay, we'll come back to you then, Joe, thank you.
That's good, because I had a homework note in the back sheet here to go through my emails from 2017 to figure out what I might have heard, so.
So Gary,
Yeah.
Gary,
Yes.
think about the park, the little park.
Oh,
At down, the little triangle park,
yeah, okay.
that's what it is.
Hey, that's tied
You know,
in.
you're cutting into your comfort zone time.
We'll wait. I'll wait. Oh, it's been fun. You could catch all of this is conversation. You gotta get some.
Well, Okay,
Half of it's
so we are back in room and I believe that Joe and company ought to be able to hear us. Yeah, Tristan should be able to hear us okay. Just nod, Tristan, if you would. Okay, thank you. So then, Joe, we're gonna skip back to S-164, Goat River Diking. And go ahead with what you have come across.
Yeah, so through the chair, what's really interesting is that, so there's a little park and you, Kelly, you and Roger may both be familiar. I'm sure like Gary will remember it. But it's called Bliss Park. It is, in, right down, it's right at the, it's a triangle shaped park, just a little community park. And Roger, I believe you've probably funded that through grant and aid, a grant to the community association, even up last year.
Yes, there was a grant, and I wondered whether that's where they got that from. And of course, it's not something that carries forward every year. There was a grant request for Bliss Park to add some tables and do a July Canada Day event.
Correct.
Is that where they got the 3,000 from?
Yeah, so like so number one, in their budget, they actually say so 7,500 for S-164. And then they include a line for Area C grants, 3,000. So that looks like it's pretty consistent. So like they actually have that expectation. But when I go back
Area
to
B?
2000, area, like it always, well, this year's, or no, the very first one I saw was very clear. It actually said Area C. But I can tell you there's a little bit of a history about Bliss Park, and now this is starting to come back. Bliss Park used to be maintained through the service S-224. Craig, we actually used to send, I think you may have heard some of this around the lunch table with Stu, but we used to send staff down to maintain that park, and we did all the improvements down there through that service. I can't exactly remember when. I believe it was around the time of the referendum, but I may be wrong. That park, we removed it from being funded from S-224. The intent, there was this long conversation about no parks in Creston, BC. So it was given back to the Goat River Community Association to maintain. It looks like to me that the intent in the budget in 2017 was to provide that funding through service S-164. It seems pretty clear that that's probably what the intent was, but when it came to doing the actuals that year, just the grant for the dike was applied for, and Area C at that time provided a grant for the part that suspiciously looks exactly like what the budget amount in S-164 would have been. So it looks like we're actually taxing in S-164 to provide the Goat River Community Association funds for the dike and Bliss Park. But when it comes to doing the actual grant, we're only giving the $7,500 for the dike. And then it seems that there's separate grant applications going in for the other funding to the local directors for Bliss Park or things, changes, upgrades, and those kinds of pieces. So that is what I have found.
Okay. Director Jackman.
Yeah, and I do remember some of these conversations now, and I bet you I might have some emails around them. However, totally inappropriate. So you need this year to take S-164 and tax sufficient amount of money for insurance, $7,500 grant, because that's all that's been requested, and whatever we're told general admin is, and not a penny more. And then figure out why you have this extra money as a separate exercise. But I would strongly recommend you discontinue that extra 2,500 or whatever that is. Totally inappropriate to have that taxed under a bylaw that is not intended for that purpose.
Okay, I am totally in agreement with that. And if it prompts further conversations with the group, I'm fine with that too. Roger, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree as well. Shouldn't be taxing for that park. And, it'll be, something if if there's a request from the community organization, we'll deal with it when it comes. But, no, there shouldn't be taxation for that.
Okay. Any further comments on that? Is that sufficient direction then, Joe?
Through the chair, and yeah, just correct me if I'm wrong. I think should just be direction to remove the budgeted, because there's actually a budgeted accumulated surplus. Not the what is actually there, but there's that 2,000.
334.
Yes, thank you, Gary. That amount, we should just have direction to staff to remove that amount from the 2024 5-year financial plan.
And reduce your requisition accordingly.
And Israel is so done, so direct. Good, thank you for that. That does bring a little bit more light. It means that for Roger and I, that will generate more conversation. It also means too, that the association, needs to see the value in including their community to their meetings, because that is an opportunity that's being missed right now.
Yeah,
Roger?
the other side of that is Bliss Park is actually, land operated and owned by by Modi. And, my recommendation to the community was that they negotiate with Modi to operate the park there, or on a long-term lease, or be granted the property if they're taking care of it. So, and that hasn't been settled, so.
Right. Thank you for that, Joe. Now we're going to move to S-128, Fire Protection Area A, Ryan.
We can.
Yes, please.
Thank you for putting it on this agenda, even though you guys are tangentially concerned because of things like the transfer from other services, which is the $39,883, which covers this jaws of life function somewhat. I have a few questions, and I guess the best way is, and I don't know if Deputy Chief Christ has the numbers in front or not. I had asked some questions previously about capital reserves, because there should be, major apparatus reserve. We should have a projected amount we needed for small equipment replacement, PPE and the like, and also reserve funds for maintaining the building. But backing off a little bit, this is not a service where we can just tax whatever we want. So I'd asked this the other day, and I don't have my notes. I think we had from finance, so we had Matt or somebody said, what is the cap or the maximum 2024 taxation for this service, the maximum possible taxation for this service? Through the chair to Yev or Tristan.
Through the chair, I don't have that number. I'm not sure if Yev does.
If we need to bypass it, Chair, we can, but I really need this before we vote on the budget, coming, in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from today. So then the next thing I observe that, we ran a deficit of 28,133. A lot of reasons, I suppose. You could say we ran over on salaries by $9,000, and so we ran over on benefits by, shy of $1,000. We ran under many other line items, training and stuff like this. But the thing that jumps at me right now, first, we show an actual capital expenditure of 48,800 roughly. My understanding was we could only afford that if we borrowed money. We authorized the borrowing at 55,500, or planned the borrowing, financing. We didn't borrow. We ran a deficit. Now this year, we want to borrow 60,000 for equipment financing, or essentially capital item, but we're not spending anything on capital this year. So I sure don't want to see us do a $60,000 borrowing for capital equipment, the ventilation fans, or the exhaust ventilation system, when we didn't need that amount. So if that project's done, because it shows no capital this year, then we should only borrow the proper amount under that borrowing for that specific purpose. Shouldn't just borrow 60,000, round it up. That makes money available for the service for something other than what the borrowing was intended for. So that's a big concern to me. This is why I asked for a reserve amount, some of the capital amounts, and I haven't received anything in the last few weeks. And I think I actually put to CAO Horn tangentially again to another email about sort of budgets writ large. Where's some of this information? So I have no recommendations on this budget that make sense right now because I don't have enough background information. But do not borrow money beyond a penny of what was needed for the capital project, if that's what the borrowing was for, and the capital project's done. If the project's not done, tell me how much needs to be spent in 2024 and then show it under capital in 2024. You can't just have a loose number of 60,000 floating in a budget. The other things that I asked about, the request for increases in salaries, and I understand the pressures in our volunteers, and I didn't really push back against that. What I did push back about in previous conversations, we have an estimated 20,500 in employee health and safety, and we have education and training 14,500, so combined $35,000. Actuals last year for those two were just barely over 10,000. It's a huge disparity. Now, the general comments I got back was, well, there's a lot of courses that, and I know and I respect Chief Medhurst, a lot of courses and opportunities for training that the chief would like to offer. We're already 3 months into the year, so 1/4 of this year's behind us. I have no information on what those would be and what they would cost, how many members we have in training, what is the potential maximum cost if every member took every course proposed for 2024. And all the health and safety was applied to the needs of every member for 2024. Would it come anywhere near $35,000? I suspect not. So why do we leave numbers like that in a budget? And the greatest concern is that when we leave numbers like that in a budget and we underspend, that permits the manager responsible for the service to overexpend, say on a capital item, without activating the borrowing as they should have. It allows them to overexpend because there's appearance that there's money to spend, but there is not. Is money authorized one line item at a time? If you have no authority to spend capital because you haven't borrowed the money for it, you don't spend the capital. And this comes down to the very simple process of a financial plan amendment, always open to it whenever it's needed. But I don't have the information. I was never asked to provide the input or thought on this budget through the year that I could pass on to my colleagues at board and say, yeah, we need to do this. So there's a lot of holes in this budget. I'd like to see more realistic numbers based on our roster and the training needs and the health and safety needs in those two line items. And I'd like to see what the actual status of that capital works is. And if we're still going to borrow money, we borrow money to only match that. And if that results in a difference in the requisition, come back to me before budget day board meeting, and we'll see instead of maybe dropping the budget, the total requisition, that we see what we could do to put a more adequate contribution to reserve. But again, I would like to see the sheets, when do we need to replace a fire truck? Because again, alarmingly, another budget we're not gonna discuss today, somebody proposed replacing the pumper instead of rebuilding the primary pump, which is a $750,000 expense to Window Lakeview. That when we questioned at the meeting, do we need to do this at year 10? The answer was, oh no, we can defer it 5 years. And I thought, well, I don't drive the train, I don't drive the bus. Why am I even the one who asks this question about the long-term capital needs of these services? However, if I'm gonna vote and persuade my board colleagues to fund and tax people, that's why I need to know the data. I don't have nearly enough information on these services. I'll leave it there.
When do we, is it this month we do a final vote on the budget?
2 weeks from today, sir.
2
Chair.
weeks, so your timeline is
Slim.
less than 2 weeks.
No, Yev is being told to have this budget wrapped the 14th, I believe, sorry, through the chair. Maybe Yev could confirm that. When is the expectation of the board and of executive, which I'll sit on the Wednesday before, to have this publicly publish this budget in what should be a near final state? Is that March 14th, March 15th?
Through the chair, it would be March 15th is our target, so next Friday. So there's a week for the board to and for the public to review the final draft for the board meeting the following week.
Okay, so the public for us in this area is 13th week yesterday. Okay, right. Thank you, Gary. We're gonna move along to S-129.
Well, we did put Window on.
I don't know that, yeah, it is on there, but we did have previous conversation. You did highlight some of those thoughts on there. I don't know that that which is in front of me right now, 129, is reflecting those comments. I'm not seeing it, Gary. You're more apt to spot those things. Go ahead.
Well, the major one is we're not projecting equipment replacement in the near term. I think it was 2025. We will wait and make that decision once we're certain that apparatus is no longer serviceable as a primary pumper. And by that time, to be honest, I'm hoping that we'll have a successful conversation and maybe outcome to a satellite haul in Crawford Bay, and maybe that'll become the pumper at Crawford Bay. Because I think when I'd asked earlier, the $750,000 new pumper, I said, well, what's the anticipated value of the old unit? And I got $40,000, something like that. I don't have my notes in front of me, so I might be understating it. That's what sticks in my aging memory. 30,000, thank you, Chair. Wow, if we said the town could have that pumper at 10 years old for $30,000, I think it'd be sold in a minute. So, again, the budget as it is now is less alarming. I understand town is providing a well-received level of service through their contracts and the like. I understand the contract's under review. So I don't see any alarming issues on this budget, but what I still don't see are those costs for the building long-term and the major apparatus long-term. The other thing I haven't seen and I've asked about is what we're gonna do about this alternative water supply, because I think CAO Moore in very good faith said, yeah, we can extend our services and our manpower and our training and all our administration to these areas where we welcome the fire coverage with, I think, a fairly efficient arrangement. But we have as yet no plans to meet the town's request for this alternative water supply. And we have a very small amount of money set aside. So I want to see that come to fruition in the next year or two. I know Windle Irrigation District has planned extensions of lines, upgrades to pipe size and hydrants. And I would hate to miss the opportunity to contribute towards that if that's part of what we need to contribute towards. The Windle Irrigation District is their own government. They can do their own thing. They have their own tax base. But if we owe it to the town to enhance the supply of water, especially as we expand the contract coverage area, as we just did, we need those numbers so that we can make our contribution and get that done.
All right, anything further? Any comments from staff?
Yeah, through the chair, I do have some things to add on all three services there. I don't know if you want me to wait for that or.
No, please go ahead, Tristan.
Okay, so first off on the Windell, Lakeview, apologies with the engine replacement. There was an error in the documentation for the age of the apparatus. So apologies for that. That has been taken out. So the next replacement for that engine is 2029. Regarding the Rindell budget, I'll review the number for the exhaust project with Matt Friesen, but I don't have it in front of me here, but it was close to that $60,000 number. But I'll review that as well and get actual numbers for that and reflect that number in there. In terms of training, education training, health and safety line items, those are projected out based off a template that we meet with the fire chief of each department, and it's based on what they provide to us as their needs for the upcoming year. With that said, the onus is on the chief to actually spend that, and then in addition to that, that's also up to the volunteers to have the time and availability to take those courses as well. So be happy to review those numbers. I can provide you numbers where those numbers came from. They weren't arbitrary numbers. In fact, typically through this process, we have those meetings with the chiefs, initial budget meetings. We get numbers from them based on our template and our cost structure. And then more often than not, I would say we trim those down quite a bit, even above and beyond what the asks are in most cases. Regarding S-152, just something I had to clarify my understanding on the service and in relation to the EMCR task number and recouping the money. EMCR will only pay out if there is no established taxation bylaw in an area. So because the service S-152 is a taxation service, they will not pay from essentially, this is my understanding, essentially from Yak to Ryandell. The S-152 provides that compensation for that service.
Okay, Director Jackman.
So that's in contravention to what C.A. Moore said, because the same bylaw applies to all of town of Creston, all of A, all of B, all of C, and yet town of Creston has successfully applied for approximately $20,000 in revenue. So if the town can do it, we can do it. And we need to do it, because if it's 10,000, 5,000, we need to.
The one thing that could be different though is that we're not the taxing authority for that bylaw. So it's not our bylaw that's collecting the money. I mean, so years ago, I've had some pretty long conversations with the previous versions of EMCR, and I used to actually be really good close personal friends with the person who's responsible for road rescue. So she was well aware of the bylaw that were in place, and she allowed us to continue because, the provincial money is not really a funding stream. It's a little bit of a cost recovery, and it's arguably not cost recovery, like it just doesn't really cover the cost. But that said, is that, I mean, I don't want to lead you to believe that Riondell could get it. I mean, it's up to the province to recognize them as a tasking authority, and two is they have to determine whether or not that the criteria of their policies are met. And so, with Tristan saying that, I don't want to just say that he's wrong, because it could very well be the difference is we're the town of Creston, and that bylaw, that taxing bylaw is the RDCK, and they may look at that differently. So just throw that out there, right? Because there could be a reason why.
I appreciate that. We need to sort that out. Absolutely. And maybe this is part of when we're rewriting a bylaw or reviewing a bylaw, we need to understand this. And whatever it takes. And I just have to wonder very quietly with my inner voice, was that Gundula? No.
Oh, no,
It was
actually,
well
before I came here,
It was
lady,
Victoria.
she's not retired from EMC, but it's more with Maury Hurst. She moved on, she became the fire commissioner or the assistant deputy fire commissioner of the province.
For the province.
Back to EMC, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no, I knew her from when I was in Terrace. And she
Okay.
worked there, that was her role, was road rescue, so I spent a lot of time going through that with her.
Yeah.
Because my concern was at the time, and this was before we were getting the 50,000 grant from the RDCK, was that we were really reliant, and the town of Creston was picking up the other part, and yet there's a bylaw that we were collecting, and we got $3,500 at the time, if you remember, way back when. And my fear was we could lose the provincial funding in lieu of getting $3,500.
Yep.
And so, yeah,
Thank you.
All right, we are doing good with our time. We're a little bit after 11. A couple things that we just want to touch on very quickly. In the agenda, it's noted down as high school theater. There is no attachment in eScribe to it. I'll remind everybody that it was a report that was presented to us a couple of meetings ago. And what I'm not clear about is the report, and I think I did distribute it. The report was this snapshot of activity for the most part over time. And for the contribution to the theater at the high school. But our comments around it were not real clear as to what the ask is. And why are we subsidizing some events that appear to be more non-community in nature? I believe was the line of questioning that we've had at the time. So I will go to staff, and can you verify what is the ask here?
Through the chair, what we have included in the S224 budget is a budgeted amount of $10,000. I have not had the opportunity to sit down with Stefan Clausen at the town of Creston or the society to have that discussion. But there is no intent at the moment that we would release that funding without bringing that information back to you for approval that we want to release the funding. But sorry, just with everything else that's going on during this period, I just haven't had the time to follow up on that.
So with that comment, I'm okay with the ability that it'll come back to us and then we get to decide to approve at that point in time. Right now, as a placeholder, the 10K is probably, I'm gonna say probably okay. But yes, we need to have further conversation on this. And we need to dive into why certain groups are being subsidized. These are questions I'm going to ask. For example, as I look at the information they presented, Creston Valley Teachers Association, why are we, what is that? Why are we subsidizing that? Those type of questions. So when you do, Joe, get around to having those conversations, expect that line of questioning. Anything further on this? Okay. The next item that's in our agenda. There we go. Creston Valley Tourism Society. Again, I don't have that at my fingertips, but I do know that the Creston Valley Tourism Society did ask for a grant request towards their operating budget for the year. As a member representative sitting on that committee, I appreciate the work that they do and the information that they gather. I do believe that they are very instrumental in tracking our tourism activity, enhancing the opportunities in the Creston area. And so they are, in my estimation, doing well with any of the grant money that we're providing. This is my opening comments on that. Anything further? Go ahead.
And I ask an elephant in the room question, because as MRDTs and tourism associations alike were formed, there were some parts of the province, I think South Okanagan comes to mind, where there's an expectation that if there was previous funding for that function through local government, that it would continue. Has that been part of the conversation? Because it was part of the conversation some years ago, that is there an obligation to fund the tourism society over and above what they're collecting? Or is this simply now not presented as an obligation, but more as just sort of a wide open request from year to year? Is there any inference of an obligation to pay some amount?
And to answer that question, I actually invited them to make a presentation to the Valley Services, based on a meeting that I attended.
Yeah.
And they had discussed a shortfall in what they were trying to accomplish through their strategic plan. And so that's why that they had, came to present to us. No, there's not an expectation.
Okay.
They're at a point in time in which they have to, reapply for the, MRDT.
Renew it.
And then the caution there is, if you're familiar with it, there's a 2%, 3%. Do we continue with the 2% ask? Do we ask for the 3? And the discussion on the table is you gotta be careful about the value that you bring to the table if you're going to request for a 3. But there's no certainty that they'll be successful in their application until it's put forward. Anything further on that? Seeing none. Got Wild Safe BC budgets.
Sir, Manager Wolf is online, if he's still listening.
So
Yes,
my opening comment would be is that from my chair, looking into the programs that are offered, there's a shotgun approach to collection of funding. And it would seem to me that RDCK is being requested to contribute to the program in a lot of different capacities. That is more area-based, more regional-based. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but was this the BEAR program? Is that what this ask was for?
Largely,
Largely? And I guess my comment is that I don't see the benefit of contributing to this, because there's so much BEAR awareness out there by so many groups already. As a person who owns and lives in the rural, when the bear came and knocked over my apiary and tore it to shreds, my first instinct was to go online and figure out, okay, what am I doing wrong here? How am I gonna protect myself? And I became educated, and there's a lot of information online. And so then in the future, as we watch the migration of bears coming through our property, we've done a good job of educating ourselves. So that's sort of the responsibility that I took as a property owner. So I wonder where the value is going to be with continuing to contribute to a flyer program, when their website is well versed in the information that one seeks. So that's sort of my knee jerk on this. It's not a knee jerk, actually. I thought this one through. I'll leave it open. Gary.
yeah, thanks. I think hopefully Uli can answer some of the questions directly. I thought also, though, we want to have a person that's able to go to the communities, and sometimes the first targets are to go to a campground, or a area where public might gather on the beach, and maybe it'll be an orchard or somewhere where there's seasonal workers that may, maybe they can improve their habits that don't leave bear attractants out. So yeah, mail out maybe is less impactful, but having a person in the field being able to move around and talk to people in hotspots and remind everybody who's there that this matters is useful. I don't know if they do any coordination with the harvesting of picking of fruit, but any component of assistance to that. A lot of people don't pick their fruit, but if a little bit of effort goes in, you get volunteers and do that. The other question that I think we had at the board discussion that Mike, CEO Moore wouldn't have been involved in is, it's not very clear to us how much municipalities are contributing. And if there's, it's not really a double dip, but there's a bit of a veil or a mystery there. So Uli was gonna maybe try and get some information through Todd on that. And then of course, CEO Moore could tell us, is the town giving 1,000, 5,000 a year? Those were some of the questions.
I can tell you the dollar figure right now.
Okay, to you, Uli. Oh, I will say, just to your comments, or a comment to your, my personal experience with neighbors, with bears is the conservation officer was fantastic. Coming out and providing direction and keeping an eye on things. And that's what I would expect in our mayor, our chair mayor, is not here right now with his background in this as well, but, personally watching that situation unfold, the conservation officer was the key in, and that was a fruit tree problem. On somebody's property and, was highly successful in curtailing that, diffusing that situation. Roger?
Yeah, Uli, could you clarify? I thought part of this budget was to have someone educate children through the school system. Is that so, or?
That is to a smaller degree correct. We have as well environmental education program that may pick up facets of that. But I think generally speaking, first of all, we need to understand that our funding is only one component of funding the overall program. And I think Todd laid that out in his report fairly much in detail. So our funding is only one element of several funders. The original ask for additional funding was triggered for two reasons. A, we had not increased our funding for, I believe, 5 years now and have never adjusted for CPI. B, CBT did end their funding for the future of the program. So that's where the funding gap came from. In regards to benefits, I believe, and unfortunately, Mayor is not present, but if you talk to CEOs, I think they would have a very different picture of the benefit of this program. And when we have years of higher conflict potential, may it be lack of food source up in the mountains and bears come increased, or not only bears, it's cougars and you name it, increased into the valley. We know that we have very often situations where our conservation officers are overwhelmed. There is often it comes to in peak situations, to situations where they take a different approach, that bears are a lot more shot than they would in other situations. So we have peaks and valleys in regards to the overall program needs, and the education component is an important one for people to participate and do their part in regards to preventing issues. The education, you are correct, has been going on for many years, and many people have meanwhile been educated, but we have to as well acknowledge that we are an area, A, of tourism, B, of people moving to the area and moving out of the area. So you have mobile situation in a way where the population changes that you need to address in regards to your education programs. I don't know what to say further, but what I've seen so far, the program has done significant services and continues to provide significant services in educating the general public. We see through their reports how much people draw on their services. There's elements of, as Director Tierney pointed out, of education of youth, not only in schools, but as well in form of approaches on markets and things like that, where they provide courses and education to children and youth in regards to wildlife conflicts and prevention of such. So don't know what more to say. I do not have any new information in regards to the municipal contributions. I don't know if the CAO town of Creston can give information in regards to your area. But what we have seen, and Todd provided some of the information, there is various agreements of various municipalities, not all, but various municipalities that contribute to this program in their way.
What is the ask on this, Uli, for, and what
The
service?
ask, sorry, the ask is overall, now I forget the number, $18,000 or $28,000 for the year. I did a back of the napkin calculation. This comes through your rural administration service S101. It would be equivalent to a 0.0148 per thousand charge that you would see. So it would be equivalent to about 60 cents for a $400,000 assessed value home.
And CEO Mike would have had the number.
Yeah, so the town of Creston contributes $4,000 a year to WildSafe. And their program is about partnering with multiple contributors. So like the whole program is based upon for like the coordinator for our area. So there's funding that comes, and I don't quote me on all of them because I'm probably gonna miss some, but the province of British Columbia through their conservation programs contributes money to it. Various local governments contribute money to it. So like, if I remember correctly, in the presentation, like, you know, the town of Creston, the RDCK, Selmo, I'm just speaking for the area for, you know, for our coordinator area, you know, contribute to that. And that pays for that halftime coordinator. I think it's a halftime position, or usually that's what it is about a halftime coordinator position that goes out and does education, goes to the farmer's market, it does, you know, so I'm not sure all, they go into schools during this, you know, they have a school year, so they have an educational program. But I think the whole program works based upon, you know, everybody's contribution. It's not like one funding source. It's like, I think there's 5 or 6 funding sources. CBT, I think, sold funds.
Hey, Gary?
If I may, sorry, if I may add, you asked about the contribution. So at $20,000 per year overall rural admin contribution, that would work out to Area A contribution of $1,978, Area B $2,392, and Area C $968.
All right, thanks, Uli. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that A, B, and C would be about $5,000, or about 25% of the rural tax base.
Yeah.
So we're 5.1, which is a lower level of participation than towns buy-in, if you think per capita. And the problems are more in my backyard than Mike's backyard, or Denise's backyard, or sorry, Councillor Dumas's backyard. And they do go out to both public campsites like Lockhart or Garland. They go out to private campsites like Kokanee Chalets, where they'll have a lot of trouble sometimes in some years, being right at the edge of the wetlands where the sows will like to bring the little ones for in the spring, early in the year, including grizzlies. So there's a safety aspect to the awareness that's not, you know, black bears, people aren't too afraid of them, but it's a bigger issue than that sometimes. So, yeah, I appreciate the town's contribution and their commitment already. I guess I'm not ready to back out of this yet. If there's a more efficient way to do it down the road, I guess we should look at it, but I'm not ready to back out of it. But that'll be a board decision. Well, I guess, I don't know if it'd be a sub-regional decision or not. I guess it
That was
is.
gonna be a question of
I
mine.
guess it
That's
is.
101, that's a board decision. It's
Yep.
not like we can opt out in this area if we chose.
It's a rural committee potentially and then board finally.
Yeah, sorry, and So
If-
I believe it's done separately, like the municipalities,
Yes.
so that'd be on part of your rural committees that would look at that, because the municipalities are not paying into that. So we pay separately.
Yeah, Willie?
If I may, yeah, no, it is not a sub-regional decision unless you change the funding formula. This is currently paid as a contribution from rural administration as 101. So unless the majority of the members of the Rural Affairs Committee agree to changing the funding formula or stop the funding, it is not up to the sub-regional members alone.
Go ahead, Gary.
And as rural chair, I don't have it flagged to go on the agenda for whatever, 13 days from now, but if anyone wants to put it on the agenda, just put a note in and it'll be on the RAC agenda for, 2 weeks yesterday. But it's not flagged yet. I think it was such a loose conversation at board, and I still haven't found Todd's report here, but I'll give up looking. It was such a loose conversation. Again, I don't know if we had enough information to make a change without maybe upsetting the apple cart. And that pun is intended, my bad humor of the day. Because it's the apples and the plum trees that cause all the trouble in my backyard. Very few pear trees left.
All right. That's the end of the items on the agenda. It does not,
No follow-up action list, Chair?
no, sorry, under.
Oh, sorry, under 6.
Yeah, under 7.1.
Seven.
But I want to make sure that if anything else is of importance to our members, that now's the time that can get that table before we move on to new business. So, and I don't see anything, but I do appreciate the time that we spent going through this today. We are going to be sitting down with the public on March 13th. Having these conversations around these items provide me with the necessary confidence and background to have conversations with my constituents and the people that will be here asking questions. This was well worth my time. I would hope that, and I don't know if this has been the norm in the past years on budgets, but I would like to see this continue
Sure.
every year. Because this does allow us to get into and discuss and debate some of the details. Unfortunately, when we have presentations, we can ask clarifying questions, but then that's it. And we don't get a chance to think through and contemplate the value of the presentations. But in this forum, we get to do that. So thanks to the members for agreeing to this agenda. We will now move into new business, 8.1, local antenna tower siting protocol. This was put on the agenda through my ask. The context and background is currently in Wendell, predominantly in Area C. Rogers is interested in placing a 5G tower. The residents have had a town hall, a group of residents have had a town hall. There was good information exchanged. It was good debate and it was very respectful. There is a concern with the ability for the tower, the mobility corporations to just simply follow what seems to be an obscure federal requirement, and then they can stick a tower in your backyard. One of the things that came out of that town hall and further discussion is that there is a tower siting protocol that FCM has put forward. I do know that RDCK does not have that bylaw, that built into their bylaw. Town of Creston does. And I wanted to table this to see if there's any interest in looking forward or having staff come back and let us know what the advantages and disadvantages of a tower siting protocol is. Mike, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so we just actually went through that process because Rogers originally looked at putting a tower within our municipal boundaries. So first off, federal regulation is not obscure, it's not old, it's actually the requirement that they must follow. And, we spent a fair bit of time, and so I won't get into all the legal conversations, but I'll give you the general gist of it. The federal government create and like they look after all telecommunications, no different than the railroad, so you really, that's your input level, if you think that you can have the CPR tracks moved for, or maybe the grass around it, then that's what your control of cell towers are as well. So you can have a bylaw and then you get to own the entire process. You get to pay for it, you get to do the public consultation, you get to do all the input. And so if you wanna have one, a bylaw that says we'll do public consultation, if you're putting something within, say, 300 meters of a park, just use that as an example. And, we'll do the public consultation. You now own it, not the telecommunication company. So right now, this is their dime that they have to do. You own it, and then when you're done, you can send that all into the federal government and they may or may not listen to you. So the decision still stays with the telecommunicator, with the federal government. And so, it really, while there may be some self-satisfaction from a public standpoint, that, they're talking to our local government about their desire or their lack of desire to have a cellular tower in the backyard. After you've done that process and you fire it off to the federal government in the timeline that they require on the application, and then the federal government go, yeah, no, we're gonna let it go in. So that was our legal consultation at a very high level. In other words, is now that does not mean you shouldn't do one if you feel that because the federal government certainly would take into account some consultation. We chose as a municipality because of our small geographical boundaries, not to proceed having a bylaw, so we do not have anything in bylaw. Cellular towers can be put in any zone and they you don't actually control that either. And anything that you do try to restrict cellular towers to be, has to be considered reasonable. So for an example, we did look around, so it's the city of Surrey, they had a bylaw that basically, let me back up, a lower mainland community, because I can't remember where Surrey, we looked at a few. One of the lower mainland communities say that if you're putting in a cellular tower within 300 meters of a park, we will do this consultation. And with that, they will provide, and if what we kind of understood was that they could propose an alternate location if one was to be had. The town of Creston putting in a bylaw saying that that we'll do a consultation if it's within 300 meters of a park. The problem is, if you look at the size of the town of Creston, everything was within 300 meters. And so in other words, you're doing every consultation. And so you really have to look at to what value, and so to the regional district, it may be a significantly different value. This may be a much broader conversation for the regional district, certainly. But what we found very interesting in the conversation was that, from the legal opinion, is you can do this, so you have the legal right to do that, whether the federal government listens to you or not, and it's right in their regulation, is that they'll let you do your consultation, and they'll take it under consideration on their review. In other words, they do not guarantee. So back to the Rogers consultation that took place here, the public spoke to Rogers directly. Rogers did the consultation. Rogers chose to go somewhere else based upon that public consultation. So Rogers as the company, because they're getting the flack directly, other than for here that you're going to send to the federal government, that made them back off of that tower location choice. So I, just as a observer of the process that took place for us, I would say is, when the public is dealing directly with the company that's making the application, because they're also the one that wants customers in the area, and they may back off based on that. Whereas if you do it, you're collecting all that feedback. Yes, it gets shared with them, but it's shared in a collated package later. So you can take that for what it's worth. But.
Gary?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts and really appreciate Mike's comments because, there's a FCM protocol or, there's sort of a outline if we thought we wanted to get into this and establish the bylaw and when we had this conversation years back, we didn't see the upside, lots of downside. And it's another area where, are we gonna pretend to be the experts? Because the biggest challenges I've seen, and so we'll take the Riendell TELUS application. People, and we see it now with this one, I mean, I just checked my folder and my emails, and I forget the number. I mean, I remember the 30,000 for the fire engine. I should have this number in front of mine, but it is hundreds of emails I had on this, on the tower proposed, on a site that TELUS owned and had operated as a TELUS utility site and been paying taxes forever on that site. They're proposing to put, not a very big stick, 100-foot stick there. So the biggest challenges tend to be around things like safety code 6. And then we've even seen recent, at least some of us, seen recent emails that, oh, it's out of date. It was established in whenever, 2014 or something. But it's not. Every time CRTC licenses new bandwidths and they look at the impacts, they update the safety code, and this is all their expertise. And I see no path where we could possibly convince people, as we're being asked, that there's an absolute guarantee that there will be no short or long-term health effects, including on humans, animals, or even soil, which is what we're being asked. Where's the upside on us trying to become experts in that? We will never be. This is a global argument. It's not going away. It just exists. So the default was we don't try to create our own bylaw and try to become any form of expert, but we will and have been asked for a comfort letter, and I expect town would be asked for a comfort letter as well. Does this proposal violate any like, or contravene any land use bylaws or any land use restrictions within that local government that they'd like to be aware of? It doesn't mean they have to listen to it, but they just ask for a comfort letter. So in the past, I've seen a few of these go out way back to when Miri Grand was still with us. She's with City of Castlegar now as their chief planner. That, yeah, there's very little we can say. Our comfort letter said that, yeah, there's really no issues that we have any control over, that we have authority over. Parallel to that, though, I was asked to challenge process, and so I did. And so the one in Riendell, what they did, they had the initial mail out, and there was a challenge. They were mailing out to people who were seasonal residents who may not have received in a timely manner that notification. Might have gone to a P.O. box, might have been inappropriate. Maybe they should have searched the real landowner and made sure it went to the registered property owner's address in Kelowna or Edmonton or wherever. There were challenges around when they held their public meeting and received questions both verbally and then in writing, whether they fully responded to those concerns. And they had an obligation to have a second round, like you ask the land manager a question, they give you an answer, and then you can ask another question around that response for further clarification. So I had 3 residents that said they had affidavits. They would sign affidavits that the land managers, the representatives for TELUS, failed to respond to the second round of questions as required through the process set up by ISED, Innovation, Science and Economic Development, by the feds. So that one failed at ISED because myself and others identified and had a board resolution stating that in spite of the fact we gave a comfort letter from planning, we observed directly a failure to fully comply with that procedure as set out by the feds. And so on that basis, we ask ISED to either force the service provider, TELUS, to provide additional responses or whatever they think is fit. ISED said, no, start the process from scratch, do it again, because they didn't follow the process. So as a community advocate, in my hundreds of emails, that was my only useful contribution to that, because I had some people talking in my left ear saying, we need this tower, we need safety, we need communication. People talking in my right ear saying, NIMBYism, not in my backyard, this will never be acceptable, society is on the wrong path. So the only hope I think we have is to observe the process. Where we see an issue, we can ask the board to make a statement around process and alert ISED of we see any failures to follow process. Beyond that, it is a no-win. We will have no power. I think CAO Moore framed it very well.
So to that, thanks for that. That's very good. very clear, and Mike as well. So to that, we know that we have a contact within RDCK, the planner Corey, who has been encouraged to receive a lot of this, any of the documentation coming from the constituents, whether they're in support of or not. But is it clear within there that we will, in a timely fashion, get a report at the board on where the status of this is? Or do we have to ask for that?
We should automatically receive a staff report around whether or not we would recommend issuing a comfort letter. And I'd be interested in Mike's interpretation if that's exactly what town would be asked, the same thing for a comfort letter, saying that we've looked at the proposal from the land use perspective and here's what we can observe or pass along. Is that ever been a request to the town, or maybe you never got that far?
We never got that far up, particularly they were seeking to put the tower on one of our properties. And so, what we had, so first off, they're really good to work with. You know, like, well, Rogers was anyhow, so like their staff will, you know.
Yep.
So, you know, there was some good communication back and forth between our staff and their staff, so I don't know. But they were seeking to utilize one of our properties, so what we suggested to them was rather than any commitment from the town about the usage of the property, that they should engage in their public engagement and determine, you know, because that was the only thing council actually had over them, is that we, you know, it was our property they were asking to go on. And so, if the public consultation, which it did, was very negative for the location and the public perception in that area, that would have allowed council to say no, not because they had any authority to say no to a cell tower, only no that you can't put it on a solid. I also caution council that, you know, when you're doing that, is that consultation for that area also means they could go across the fence into the RDCK area onto one of those vacant lots next to us and put it there, and that consultation's already done. Because again, the federal legislation trumps all of your bylaws on zoning. And so now the only good thing is that the federal government encourages the cellular, you know, the communications companies to work with local governments. You know, in other words, don't go in and just, oh, we're towing there and we don't care. That's not, and the federal government doesn't allow that to take place, from what we can understand. But they certainly expect that working together. So I mean, certainly if there was concerns about zoning or location of the parks, and you express that, I'm from our experience working with Rogers over the last year, likely you will get some, you know, conversation
Accommodate.
back. Well, yeah, they'll try to accommodate, or they'll try to, you know, for sure. But they have to send all that information to the federal government to get that approval.
Gary, go ahead.
One other thing comes to mind, because there's accommodations they can make, as I said. So they may come into the least cost approach. So depending on, I should be more clear, Health Canada Safety Code 6 identifies the current interpretation of the harm or potential harm from RF, from radio frequency, the radiation. So for certain installations at certain heights, at certain power levels, in certain locations, they can sort of use a default where they say there's no anticipated harm to residents or human health. Or they can, and sometimes they're required to do a much more detailed analysis to show you for the proposed antenna array, what that would look like 50 feet away, 100 feet away, 500 feet away. And so for the Riendell one, I requested that because I was aware of the possibility. So to them, it was a little extra cost, but we're talking $1 million or $2 million for some of these towers. It was a little extra cost to do a much more detailed analysis. And so the one thing that gave is it nailed down exactly what the proposed array was, what the frequency ranges were. And they're not like the old radio antenna that just broadcasts in all directions. They're highly directional, they're positioned in banks, so they may say we have a target here and a target here, then line of sight connection to Balfour, say where you'll observe a new tower once you get on the ferry at Whitney Bay. So they have these different arrays and they will show a dispersion of the signal strength at a certain, like, going up and going down and in distance. and they can give you an indication of potential health harm. And so even for someone climbing the tower, and they need this, because even though the signal's going out kind of horizontally and down, as you climb the tower, there's still a point at which you need certain safety precautions. So I requested this additional analysis to provide residents a little better understanding, and I pulled this out of my briefcase because it's turned off. And it stays turned off because I don't need to be, this is a, radiation generator, same as this and the same as this. You don't need to be around this all the time. Plus, I don't want it to ring.
For those
So-
people on the screen, he held up his cell phone.
My flip phone. So, understanding the intensity and the radiation we voluntarily expose ourselves to continually, some people, they sleep with a phone beside their head, beside their bed, that's always trying to reach a cell tower at maximum output if there's a weak cell tower signal, because it needs to try and reach that tower. Understanding the detailed impact of this tower on their community at 50 feet, 100, 500 feet. I asked for that and they provided that. That fueled the fire of resistance, as it turned out, because then people started talking about Bill's house and he's 85 years old, and then Jane's house and she has this and that. But that is another advocacy piece, if it helps or doesn't help, that you can request a more detailed health analysis. The other pushback it got, of course, was it's out of date in Europe, they're smarter than we are and they're doing something different. But it's an advocacy piece we could request, and I've held off on that so far. The more detailed radio frequency analysis on the perimeter.
You're talking about for the window one.
Yeah, you'd ask the land manager. I dealt with Chad Marat, is it, 10 years ago, and another woman who may not be with that land management group. No, the Bellis was the other person. Yeah, they can provide that if you ask.
Okay, as a director, not.
I asked as a
not
director, as an advocate for my community.
Okay, just clarity on that.
Yeah.
Good, thank you for that. So I mean, at this point in time, is there any value with having this conversation also at North Bears?
Later in the year, after we're past budget, after we see the impact of the Bill 44, 46, 45 maybe, and all the other stuff
Yeah.
on our planning and our staff and our long range, later in the year, absolutely.
So the only question I would have is, and I'll reach out to Corey, is when would would he expect the report?
The staff
summary
report.
To be, the staff report for the board. I need to know that.
Yeah.
All right, okay. Anything further on this? This can become a very, as anybody knows who's dealt with it, a very hot, contentious issue. A lot of good people out there just simply don't know and are really wanting to get involved in the information stream on this when it does start happening in their backyard. That's really what it is they just need to understand and know. They just want more information. And so as the director pointed out, I want to make sure that there's no barriers for them to get the information that they need. All right, thank you for indulging that on the agenda. If I may, we can move on to item number 3 of our action item list, and then we will have a public time. So, Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's scribble notes. Item 2 is not what we asked for, and it's not done. So I've said this so many times, I'm not even gonna read it again. But on the quarterly report, it reads differently, and I pointed this out at board, I pointed this out to senior managers directly. What's the point of having 2 lists when they don't read the same? So, do what we want with that. It's of more interest now because we just did a press release telling people we have a bylaw and dog control portal where people can call in and voice their concerns. So I put to our senior management, thank you very much for using the word dog control, because after years of asking for a way to assist the RCMP to effectively respond to dangerous animals, not stray animals, but dangerous animals, after years of asking, now you've invited more people to call me and you guys up and say, well, what are you doing about this? So,
Okay, so staff direction needs to be to CAO Horn.
Done.
Where are we at with this, and why is there an inconsistency in the work and the status that's being reported?
And so I made that specific request.
And for the benefit of those following online, we're in our action items, and it is item number 2 on the action items list. So at this point, Denise, yeah, we kind of just feel free to bring up anything that's catches your attention on the action items, and staff is here to be able to respond to it. Roger.
Is Yev still there? Yeah. Just wanted to confirm that the Lister Cemetery is back in the budget for funding. And not to release previous funds that were not contributed to them, just 2024 and forward.
Through the chair, I would have to double check that. I'd have to confirm that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Believe I did.
I believe they are. We have had lots of discussion about it, and they've handed in all the information that's required, and so I fully anticipate that it is, but I haven't checked, so thought I would just ask.
So through the chair, I build that budget for Yev. I believe I made those changes as per the direction. But I'll double check and confirm with Yev.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will jump in and say that our Creston Education Center, probably the tour will occur after our budget period. I think is most appropriate.
Through the chair, yeah, we can set up anytime.
Yeah, because it's got in the status complete question. Okay, and then if I may, I'll also go to item number 15, which is the upcoming here very shortly, raising of the flag for Jet Fulmerton. And I understand by the meeting that I had yesterday with the group that they're waiting to get some confirmation back from RDCK. It sounds like more to do with the process, that it's okay to proceed with. Kayla has not gotten anything back. And then a question around the MOA that we can. What is the MOA memorandum of, what does A stand for?
Agreement.
Agreement, yeah, that'll look.
Through the chair, is that about the legacy wall?
That's about the legacy wall.
So through the chair, I think we've seen preliminary designs, the concept, and we're just going through with that group to confirm that will fit with the space. We did the walkthrough, so until we figure out what the design is, or if they finalize the design, then I think we can work on the MOA.
Okay, so then that concept is, conversation will happen, and then the MOA would be presented.
Yes.
There's not a template or a reference MOA that could be circulated.
Oh, through the chair, I'll ask corporate admin for something like that. That's what they're looking for, yeah.
Okay, so those are the 2 items that came up in that meeting last.
So through the chair with the banner rating, and probably just a gap, but yeah, the manager will reach out to the Jets and the Minor Hockey Association to confirm the process for raising the banner.
Okay. Denise?
Yeah, through the chair, I think what Kayla is looking for is the memorandum with Nelson so that she could compare. Was that what she was asking?
Yeah,
for?
the template, that's where
Okay.
Nelson could
Thank
have
you.
been. Just to get an idea as to get ahead of the game, so to speak.
And Chair, was there a time frame for that? Because I think I heard something about they wanted to try to, I guess, announce it or present it at the tournament, provincial.
Right, so the raising, the flag raising will occur in about 10 days.
Yeah, 17th, I believe.
So that process there needs to be understood and communicated. Sure. Sooner than later. There's no hiccups anticipated, it's just getting to hear from RCK that, yep, Okay,
Yeah, for the chair, for the banner rating, it's probably just a gap in communication, but there's no delay in that. We'll make that happen.
Roger.
Chair, I was referring to the legacy project overall. And, could that be announced during the tournament or at the opening of the tournament about the fact that they're building this legacy, display?
Right, so the intention is to have during that tournament and some other dates, key dates, to have a mock-up or a representation of that legacy asset here at the arena. So I'm not sure, I don't believe Kayla mentioned last night that they were seeking approval for RDCK to allow them to do that or not. I didn't hear that. But as Roger has pointed out, is there an approval required for them to begin showcasing, although premature, to some degree?
That's a good question. So the chair will, I believe there is an approval required, but as far as presenting a concept, a project, or something like that to the community, I don't think there's anything that would interfere with that. As far as saying, we're working with the RDCK on developing an agreement, currently just a concept, and we're fundraising. There's nothing that would prevent that happening.
Okay. Anything further on the action list? I am seeing none. So now.
Through the chair, could I just give Roger so you can have that piece all finished up about Lister?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Go ahead.
Alrighty. So Roger, yes, the funding is there. If you were to look at that budget, it's in the allocated surplus. The reason that it's there is so that it, as per direction, it doesn't if I had it listed in the grants, it could automatically go out. So I've put that amount in the accumulated surplus, and at some point in time, we would need to amend the budget if we want that grant to be received. Does that make sense?
And that would happen in August after you receive the paperwork required in order to trigger finance to release it.
So the funding is there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Okay, public time, item number 10. Sarah, would you like to address the group?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to just a couple of things to keep in mind when we were thinking about the library budget accounts. So we've asked for less than the CPI amount the RDCK is using this year for budgets. So just slightly less though, to make sure that we're keeping up with the cost of living. We are going into collective bargaining with our staff who are unionized next week. And our collective agreement that's backdated to the beginning of 2023 will be a significant increase in wages and benefits in order to keep up with the cost of living and to maintain the service levels that we already have. The additional provincial amounts from the enhancement grant that are meant to be used over 3 years will be entirely used up on staff wages. Staff wages are the biggest expense of any public library, and we actually allocate a smaller amount of our overall budget to that currently than most other public library systems. So we have the collective agreement happening next week, and then there's also a provincial election in October. So depending on whether or not it's a government that's favorable for public library service or not, we're gonna be on the hook for keeping up those wages if the province doesn't cover that. So if the province doesn't cover that amount, that means we're dipping into our capital reserve to maintain the same level of service we have. So the reserve amounts that you see are a kind of wait and see amount. The other amount that you see in investments is a private donation that is entirely earmarked for facilities upgrades that aren't included in the RDCK responsibilities for that building. So for example, this year we're using about $80,000 of that amount to change our flooring and to create a dedicated teen space, which we've never had in our library, and most modern public libraries do that. Some things to keep in mind about our public library service program. We're a public library association under the BC Libraries Act, which means that we are a volunteer-run board. Now, we're growing. We are currently maxed out at our service levels, and there's still more demand. We can be a bigger library system because the service demand is there. Do we want to keep doing this system where I come every year and ask for a grant amount and our volunteer board decides what to do with that? Or do we want to be a regional library system that is funded like the department underneath the regional district? Or do we want to be a municipal library? So this is a question for the town. Libraries that are similar size, just a bit bigger than us around us, Nelson, Cranbrook, Trail, they're all municipal library systems. So the town actually appoints the board based on library recommendations, and then we're a budget line under that. So we kind of grown to the size where those are things that we want to be thinking about going forward. So those are just things I wanted to throw out there when you're thinking about our budget.
Gary?
Yeah, if I can, and under some of the models where it's a municipal, say, City of Nelson owned operated library with contribution agreements from E, F, and I don't know, G, but H certainly. There sometimes is provision for those electoral areas to appoint one or more members to the board as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So when, when saying the town appoints the board, it may be a collection of municipally appointed and rural appointed, just so there's a good balance and some outreach to
Yeah.
what service levels being provided to rural areas. So that those models are there to look at, certainly.
And they're all within the Library Act already, how they're meant to be organized and governed.
Is there a direction to staff that, at some point down the road, perhaps this year, we ought to look at a variety of those models?
Chair, if I could, that's bigger than a direction to staff. That would have to be a board authorized, I would think, recommendation, and I don't know if we're ready for that, but that could be substantial work on Mike Morrison's department. So I don't think that's this, well, should let Joe speak. He should push back because he's got lots of other stuff to do
Joe
before
he
then.
doesn't like pushing back.
Through the chair, I can barely hear what Sadar was suggesting. I think it was that the library become more like a operated RDCK service, like a municipal library services, but I'm not 100% sure.
Just something worth looking at in the future, Joe, given that we're growing a lot bigger and I think this committee is sort of maybe getting a little uncomfortable with the amounts that I'm asking for that are entirely governed by a volunteer board and not necessarily accountable through heavy reporting to this committee.
Through the church, sorry, I haven't been, because library services have been, and I'm sorry, through the chair, I made a mistake. I should ask Kelly if that's okay to continue.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, sorry. I'm just, we do have, and it wouldn't be something that I think we should consider right now, but maybe what we're talking about, we do have funding in reserve as we've discussed today. Maybe, I don't know what the proper language is when it comes to libraries, but maybe it's almost like what we did with a more of an operational focused like study process in order to provide options to the committee if that's what something they want to consider. That would be something that, we might be able to start later in the year, but I would have to check with Tricia and Greg just about our workload. We are committed to a number of engagement projects this year already. So I think I did hear Gary say that I should push back, but I think, there probably is, if we want to look at how we're organized, I would suggest that's probably something we may want to get some consulting expertise on.
Thanks for your response, Joe and Gary as well, and Sarah.
Chair, you have observer online if they had a question. I don't know if they're there.
Thank you. Yes, it is now open to online. As Gary pointed out, he can see that there is an observer. Would you wish to ask a question at this point? Trying to hit the unmute button perhaps, but I'm not seeing any response. So, all right. We are at the end of our agenda, and I will say thank you to everyone. Gary wants
Motion to adjourn.
to adjourn, and it is all carried forward. We will meet again April 4th, 9 a.m. Their new and time changes, does not change this weekend for some of us, but it does for others.
Not us, man. Good job, Chair.
Oh,
And I can't make any of the EAP. I was hoping my advisory plan